Welcome to Fiction Audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, like and subscribing would be greatly appreciated. If you have any recommendations for novels, comment below.
Please join my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/fictionaudiobook.
Chapter 344, What It Means to Be a Father. Wade Wilson, 20 feet away from the nearest chunk of ongoing combat, stopped mid-monologue. "Okay," he said. "Okay, so that's new. And also deeply concerning for our special effects department's budget. Do you have any idea how expensive VFX and lighting rigs are?" Oblivion stopped advancing and the scythe meant for love hung in the air, forgotten. He looked at what was standing across from him and the raw grief rage in his expression went through several transformations before it settled on an amalgam that incorporated all of them simultaneously. "What are you?" he said, a genuine question from a being that had existed since before questions were necessary, asked because it had encountered a thing it needed to actually know the answer to. "Still me," Jay said, and his voice carried without volume, resonating across dimensions in a way it hadn't before. "Still human, still an outsider and most importantly still a father." He raised his left hand, his only remaining hand, and looked at it, at the prismatic light running through his veins, at the way his blood was spiraling even beneath his skin in microscopic helixes. He looked directly at Oblivion, and his ruined right eye socket blazed with the same six-colored light. "You want to talk about the outsider? All right. Let's talk." He took a step forward and the arena floor cracked under the step from the weight of 6 infinity stones, for cosmic abstract principles and every stolen power he'd ever integrated, all of it held together by a human heart that refused to stop beating. "You've been telling me all day what I am. Parasite. Aberration. The thing that doesn't belong, that infected this multiverse, that should never have walked through the door. And you know what? Some of that's fair." He took another step as rainbow blood dripped from his stump, from his eye, and where it hit the ground it burned with prismatic fire. "I didn't grow up here. I was favored by the one above all. I only kept stealing from this universe. But I walked in and fell in love with a woman who was already here, and adopted a son I didn't plan for, and I made a mess of the balance of things because I wasn't mindful enough of the consequences of my action." The light around him intensified. "But my son is 5 years old. He loves his dinosaur. He puts his hands over his ears when things get loud. He has this thing where he leans his forehead against Bonk's when he's scared because Bonk presses back and it helps. He didn't ask to exist. He exists because of my actions. Yet he's who he is because I love his mother and she chose me back. The poor thing has done nothing wrong except be born in a way that makes some cosmic entities uncomfortable because of who his genetic material belongs to." Jay stopped walking 10 feet from Oblivion. "You called Domino, the love of all my lives, a whore," he said, and his voice was very quiet but it carried to every corner of the arena. "In front of our son. In the court of the living tribunal, with the full gallery present. You tried to dress it up in regal language, outsiders' corruption of the bloodline, violation of the multiverse's integrity, all of it. But what you said was that the woman I love was reduced by loving me, and what you meant was that she should have stayed in her approved category and not chosen the thing you didn't find appropriate." The prismatic blood flowing from his wounds began to spin. "That's not cosmic law. That's just you, a small, mean, personal thing wearing a cosmic hat." He paused, and his expression softened fractionally. "I'm sorry about your sister. She made choices today that I don't think you'd have advised her to make, and what happened to her is not the outcome I wanted. She should have just stayed in her confinement and repented for her actions. She should have stayed out of this. That's not on you." Even Oblivion paused before his scythe came up, trembling in his grip. "Enough talking, you vermin," he said, and his voice had found its depth again, the void resonance that predated words. "You want to be here? Then stay here. Be part of this multiverse and accept what it costs." "Right," Jay said. "Yeah. All right." He raised his right arm. Except it was just the stump. The end of it, where the arm had been taken, where rainbow blood poured in a steady stream, the prismatic light bleeding from destroyed tissue. But now the blood didn't just pour anymore. It erupted. A geyser of prismatic life fluid that defied entropy itself, spiraling upward from the stump in a helix pattern that the 6 infinity stones locked into dimensional permanence, and the Carl Creel-derived absorption, working with the infinity stone scaffolding adjusted to the power theft synthesis, all of it converging on the specific problem of a missing limb, and the solution it arrived at wasn't mere regeneration. It was weaponization. The rainbow blood hardened mid-spiral, crystallizing into a physical construct that shouldn't exist, each color finding its place in the rotation. Purple at the outer edge, raw kinetic force from the power stone. Orange spiraling inward, the weight of every life he'd touched from the soul stone. Yellow in the third layer, every memory of his son's laughter from the mind stone. Green deeper still, every tomorrow he was fighting for from the time stone. Blue near the core, the distance he'd crossed to find his family from the space stone. Red at the very center, the impossible made real from the reality stone. All of it spinning, drilling, growing, fueled by the stolen cosmic principles woven between the colors, decay, loathing, annihilation, and ending, all of it integrated, all of it finally is, held together by Darwin's adaptation screaming at maximum capacity to keep his body from flying apart. The drill extended from his shoulder, 6 feet, 12, 20, 50. Each rotation threw rainbow blood in tight arcs that burned the air where they passed. Each revolution punched hairline fractures in multiverse seams. And at the drill's tip, the very point, was Jay's last drop of purely human blood, from before the stones, the single red cell that remembered being normal, being a man who just wanted to love his family. That was what would pierce oblivion. A father's love-made weapon. "You bigoted piece of primordial shit," Jay said, and his voice was perfectly calm. "You're right that I'm an outsider. I always will be. I'm going to live with that. My son is going to live with that." The drill spun faster, growing larger, the rainbow blood construct now the size of a small building and still expanding. "But now the multiverse is going to learn to live with the both of us." His foot dug forward. "Because we're not going fucking anywhere." The charge began. Jay crossed the distance between himself and oblivion in 3 strides, each one leaving craters of prismatic fire, the drill extending before him like the prow of a ship cutting through void energy that tried and failed to slow his momentum. Oblivion raised the scythe, swung it in a horizontal arc meant to bisect Jay at the waist. The rainbow drill caught it mid-swing, the rotation grabbing the scythe's blade and pulling, yanking the weapon from Oblivion's grip and flinging it across the arena where it shattered against the far wall. Oblivion stumbled backward, void substance flickering, and for the first time since the beginning of all things his expression showed what might have been fear. "What are you?" Jay didn't answer. The drill hit Oblivion's chest. And the sound was the sound of a fundamental thing breaking, the breaking of a law, like the principle that said, the primordial void cannot be wounded, meeting the principle that said, a family man protects his family, and discovering which one the multiverse considered more fundamental. The drill bored through void substance with a sound that removed itself from the noise of the arena and occupied a different register entirely, the register of things that are happening for the first time in the history of what has always been. The hole it made in oblivion wasn't damage and wasn't a wound and wasn't any category that the gallery's experience gave them language for. It was simply there, where primordial void had been. Rainbow light poured into the wound, 6 colors spiraling into the darkness, and where they touched the void substance changed, became neither void nor light but a third thing, a thing that had never existed before this moment. Oblivion screamed. Not with his voice but with his being, the sound of entropy itself experiencing pain for the first time, howling across every dimension simultaneously. The void stumbled backward and the shadow that composed him flickered and came back and flickered again, and he went down on one knee at the arena's boundary, both hands pressed against the hole in his chest where rainbow light was bleeding into primordial darkness. Jay stood over him and the drill was still spinning, still extending from his shoulder stump, still leaking rainbow blood with each revolution, and the light around him was doing a thing that even eternity, galaxy-chested and ancient, was watching with both wonder and care, the kind of attention reserved for genuinely unprecedented events. He raised the drill for the second strike. And then he heard it. A small voice, cutting through the cosmic resonance and the void screaming in the gallery's shocked silence. "Daddy." Jay froze. He turned his head slowly and looked across the arena. Love was standing now, having pushed away from Bonk's protective bulk, and the 5-year-old was taking hesitant steps forward, small hands outstretched, eyes wide and wet and terrified. "Daddy, you're bleeding so much." The stranger fear was still there in his son's face but underneath it recognition was trying to find its way back, the child's fundamental certainty that Daddy was supposed to be safe, supposed to be the one who made things better, not the scary glowing figure covered in rainbow blood preparing to execute a cosmic entity. But the fear was winning and Love's steps faltered, stopped, and his small hands dropped to his sides. He was afraid. Of Jay. Of his own father. Jay looked at his son. Looked at the drill extending from his shoulder. Looked at Oblivion, still on one knee and wounded. And the truth hit him like a physical blow. He was standing over a grief-stricken being who'd just lost his sister, preparing to kill him while his 5-year-old son watched. He was becoming exactly what Oblivion had accused him of being. The thing that broke cosmic law, violated the natural order, that took and took and took until nothing remained. The parasite. Not because of what he'd stolen. Because of what he was willing to do with it. The drill wavered. Jay watched his wife scoop up their son, watched Love bury his face against her shoulder, watched both of them look at him with expressions that were equal parts pride and horror. The drill began to slow its rotation. "No," Jay said quietly, to himself, to the part of him that wanted to finish it, that wanted the satisfaction of victory, that wanted Oblivion gone so the threat to his family would end permanently. "No, that's not who I am." He looked at Oblivion, at the hole in the primordial void's chest, at the rainbow light bleeding into darkness. "You live," Jay said, and his voice was very quiet. Not because you deserve it or because I forgive you. You live because my son is too young and pure, he doesn't need to watch his father become a monster like you. You live because I'd rather be a good dad than a victorious man. The drill began to retract. The rainbow blood spiraling back toward his shoulder, the construct unwinding, the cosmic principles that had been unified in that perfect weapon form separating back into their component powers. But if you ever threaten my family again. Jay leaned down, close enough that only Oblivion could hear. I'll come back. And next time, I will finish it. I will finish you, your co-conspirators, and everything you care about will be taken from you. Remember that. He straightened, turned his back on the primordial void, and started walking toward his family. The transformation was already fading, the prismatic light dimming, the cosmic presence collapsing back into human dimensions, and the integration that had let him achieve fusion was still there. He could feel it, permanent now, the 6 stones and 4 cosmic abstracts no longer running parallel but truly unified. But the expression of it, the manifestation, that was being pulled back by his own choice. By his decision to be human instead of transcendent. To be daddy instead of destroyer. He'd made it perhaps 5 steps when his powers gave out. Darwin's adaptation had been screaming for the past 3 minutes, holding his body together through integration that should have liquefied his biology, and now that the immediate threat was past it was demanding payment for services rendered. Jay was smiling and walking towards his future when suddenly his danger sense screamed bloody murder. Jay. Chapter 345, Family Becomes Power. Jay's danger sense shrieked with the urgency of an avalanche, every nerve in his battered body lighting up like wildfire. He twisted mid-step, rainbow blood still streaming from his shoulder stump, and saw what his exhausted senses had missed. Oblivion was moving. Not the controlled, measured movements of a cosmic warrior guarding the multiversal boundary. This was the feral lunge of a wounded animal with nothing left to lose. The hole in his chest leaked void energy in black streamers that corroded reality where they touched, but he was past caring about the damage. Past caring about the trial, the gallery, the cosmic order he'd spent eternity maintaining. His sister was gone, and the only remains were scattered bones on the arena floor. The scythe reformed in Oblivion's hands, cobbled together from void substance and grief and the fragments of Lady Death's remains. You should have finished it. Oblivion's voice was raw, stripped of his warrior's pride, only keeping remnant rage. You turned your back on me. On the primordial void. You think mercy makes you better. You think goodwill changes what you are. The scythe came down in an arc that carved the air itself, aimed not at Jay but past him, toward where Domino stood holding Love. I'll cut this abominable family apart into void and scatter the pieces past the edge of what exists. Jay tried to move, tried to summon the drill again, tried to do anything, but Darwin's adaptation had already maxed out. His body was shutting down, cells screaming for rest, for healing, for anything except more combat. The scythe was 3 feet from Domino's throat when suddenly reality folded. There was no warning, build-up, or gathering of energy. One moment Jay was collapsing 30 feet away, the next he was standing directly in front of Domino and Love, materialized from nothing. Teleportation. But Jay hadn't done it. His powers were tapped out, and his consciousness was barely holding on. He looked down. Love's small hands were pressed against his back, tiny palms glowing with soft blue and green light. The 5-year-old's face was scrunched in concentration, sweat streaming down his cheeks. Daddy, Love whispered, huffing. I brought you back. I brought you back to us. The arena erupted. Beings who had watched cosmic entities clash after millennia, who thought they'd seen every expression of power the multiverse could produce, were on their feet. The 5-year-old had just manipulated reality itself. But this was not the surprising thing, every being in this arena could, to some extent, do it. But it was the raw, instinctive and mixture of harbinger of ninth cosmos and the mutant shaman's power now being channeled from a child's fundamental need to protect his family. But there was no time to process it. Oblivion's scythe was still coming, the void-enhanced blade screaming toward them with enough force to cleave through dimensional barriers. Jay couldn't move or barely stand. The teleportation had cost Love whatever reserves the child had suddenly gained. But they still had the new death on their side. Domino was already channeling the Death Stone to maximum capacity as she produced a barrier made of spiritual energy despite being barely available to block Oblivion since the being was a progenitor of her authority. Jay, having full trust in Domino's capability, did the only thing left. He turned, grabbed his son's shoulder with his remaining hand, met Love's terrified eyes, and smiled. That was amazing, buddy, Jay said, his voice somehow steady despite everything. You saved Daddy. Now let's save each other. And then, because fathers know things mothers don't always see and mothers know things fathers can't always understand, Jay and Domino moved in perfect synchronization. Jay channeled what remained of his integrated energy, the fusion of 6 infinity stones and 4 cosmic abstracts into his son as he used his power theft to sync his family's power to a single beat. Gently, trying not to overwhelm the child's system. Domino did the same with her Death Stone energy and probability manipulation, the violet, black, and golden power flowing into love like water finding its level. And love, the 5-year-old terrified and desperate to protect the only people who'd ever made him feel safe, took that energy and did something no cosmic entity in the gallery had ever witnessed. A child's wondrous imagination. If Daddy and Mummy gave me their power, and I imagined something hard enough, wouldn't it just be real? The answer, in the logic of a child who had never been told why that shouldn't work, was obviously yes. The barrier manifested first, a shimmering dome of purple-gold rainbow energy that snapped into existence around the three of them. Oblivion's side struck it and stopped, void energy meeting the strange hybrid power love had instinctively created. But the blade didn't bounce off. It cut. The barrier peeled apart like tissue paper, Lady Death's essence in the scythe giving it authority over endings that even love's desperate construction couldn't withstand. The blade was 6 inches from Jay's face when it stopped again. Stopped by death meeting death. Domino had channeled pure Death Stone energy, and it was holding the scythe in place through sheer conceptual opposition. Void energy tried to erase, but the new death energy accepted the erasure and transformed it into something else entirely. Stalemate. Oblivion screamed, pushed harder, void itself pouring from the wound in his chest to fuel the attack. The scythe inched forward, millimeter by millimeter, death energy straining against the primordial nothing. Jay looked at love. Saw the determination in his son's eyes, the absolute refusal to let the bad man hurt Mommy and Daddy. Saw the way the child's small hands were glowing, still channeling power he barely understood. And Jay realized something. His son didn't need to understand the power. Love just needed to imagine what it could do. Love, Jay said softly, pulling his son close with his remaining arm. Remember the robot shows we watched? The big ones that protect cities. Love nodded, not taking his eyes off Oblivion. Can you make one? I don't know how. You don't have to know how, Domino said, her voice strained as she held the Death Stone barrier against Oblivion's assault. Just imagine it, baby. Imagine it protecting us. Love closed his eyes. The energy flowing from Jay and Domino intensified, rainbow light and violet-black death swirling around the 5-year-old in patterns that made the watching cosmic entities lean forward in their seats. This wasn't how power worked. Children didn't channel energies that could reshape reality. 5-year-olds didn't construct defenses against primordial forces. But love wasn't operating on cosmic rules. He was operating on wonderful logic of imagination without burden of life weighing down on a pure soul. And in 5-year-old logic, if Daddy and Mommy gave you power, and you imagined something hard enough, it became real. Oblivion saw the energy surge and swung the scythe again, desperate to cut through Domino's defenses before whatever was building could manifest. The blade struck the barrier just as Love opened his eyes. And the universe said, "Oh. That's new." The energy construct that materialized around the family wasn't a barrier anymore. It was a mecha. 200 feet tall, composed entirely of Love's imagination filtered through Jay's integrated cosmic energy and Domino's death authority. Rainbow light formed the superstructure, probability-defying joints allowing movement that shouldn't be possible, death energy reinforcing the whole thing with the absolute certainty that yes, this definitely existed now. Oblivion's scythe struck the mecha's arm. The energy plates didn't even dent. They absorbed the impact, distributed it across the entire structure through probability manipulation that said, the force goes everywhere and therefore nowhere, and held firm. The scythe bounced off. Oblivion stared. The gallery stared. Even eternity, who had witnessed the birth of stars and the death of dimensions, chuckled with delightful surprise. Inside what served as the mecha's cockpit, Jay looked at Domino. And Domino looked at Jay. They both looked at Love, who was concentrating so hard his tongue was sticking out the corner of his mouth. And despite everything, despite the pain, exhaustion, and realization that the cosmic entity was trying to kill them, both parents burst out laughing. "That's definitely our son," Domino managed between laughs. "Remember my fight with Lady Death?" Jay was grinning now, the pain temporarily forgotten. "I built one just like this." "Like father, like son," Domino said, and there was pride in her voice. Love and the absolute certainty that yes, this ridiculous, impossible, wonderful child was theirs. The mecha moved. Not through Jay's control or Domino's manipulation. Through Love's imagination, responding to their combined will. The family was operating as one now. 3 minds linked through the energy connection Love had established. Jay's tactical experience, Domino's probability manipulation, and Love's pure creative visualization merged into a single unified consciousness piloting an impossible war machine. And as the connection solidified, as Jay and Domino really looked at what their son had created, they saw the details. The spiral motifs running along the arms. The distinctive head design, massive and imposing. The way the whole thing seemed to defy physics not through breaking the rules but through believing so hard in breaking them that reality bent to accommodate. Jay's breath caught. "Oh my God," he whispered. He made Super 10 Gen Toppa Gurren Lagann. The show Jay had recreated from scratch as they'd watched together as any self-respecting father would. The episodes where Jay had explained the themes to his 5-year-old son. Spiral power. The force of evolution. The absolute refusal to give up, no matter how impossible the odds. Love had been paying attention to more than just the cool robots. Chapter 346, Giga. Drill. Breaker. Sorry, I forgot to publish. My bad. But before they could admire their son's handiwork, before they could process the sheer absurdity and beauty of what was happening, Oblivion moved. The primordial void's form began to shift, void substance flowing and reforming. The scythe melted back into his mass, Lady Death's skeletal remains merging with his essence in ways that made the watching entities look away. What emerged was wrong. Wrong in the way things are wrong when fundamental concepts get mashed together by grief and rage. Oblivion had merged with his sister's essence, combining void energy with death authority in a fusion that shouldn't exist. The thing that formed was massive. Easily matching Love's mecha in size. 4 arms ending in claws that leaked reality corrosion. A face that was half void shadow, half skeletal grin. Wings of pure entropy spreading from its back. It looked like something from the edge of the multiverse. The kind of horror Oblivion fought to keep reality safe from. Except this time, he was the horror. The abomination opened its mouth and screamed, and the sound was every ending that had ever occurred playing simultaneously. Then it charged. The impact when they collided shattered the arena floor. Breaking apart what remained of the equalization field. Made the surviving cosmic entities grab for safety as the entire structure shook. Jay and Domino worked in perfect sync, their minds flowing through the connection to love, directing the mecha's movements with practiced combat experience. Duck the clawed swipe. Block with the left arm. Counter with the right. But they weren't just fighting. They were teaching. Feel the energy flow, love, Jay said, guiding his son's awareness through the connection. It responds to what you imagine, but you have to believe it will work. Channel it here, Domino added, showing Love how to direct death energy to the mecha's fists. Make it certain that when we hit, it counts. And Love learned. 5 years old and he was learning cosmic combat from his parents while fighting the primordial void, and somehow that made perfect sense in the moment. The mecha's movements became smoother. More confident. Love's imagination feeding off his parents' experience, adding details they hadn't thought to include. Energy wings sprouting from the back. Thrusters on the feet. A faceplate that slid down to protect the cockpit. They rose into the air, the Oblivion abomination pursuing them. The fight that had started on the arena floor expanded upward, the 2 massive constructs trading blows that sent shockwaves through dimensional barriers. And as they fought, they grew. Not just in size, though that too. The mecha was expanding with each exchange, Love's imagination feeding on the combat, on the connection with his parents, on the desperate need to win. But they were growing in power. The integrated energy flowing through the construct was adapting, learning, evolving with each moment. Jay's power theft was subconsciously analyzing Oblivion's attacks and incorporating aspects of them. Domino's probability manipulation was finding better and better outcomes. And Love's imagination was taking all of it and saying, yes, and what if we could do this? Oblivion matched them. The grief-mad fusion of void and death was growing too, drawing on reserves that predated creation. Each exchange left them both larger, more powerful, the scale of combat expanding beyond what the arena had been designed to contain. They breached the arena ceiling. The equalization field couldn't hold them. Cosmic entities scrambled to reinforce the barriers, but the 2 combatants were past caring about containment. The fight spilled into real space. Then into higher dimensions. The Watcher's observation deck became a front-row seat to something that should never have been possible. 2 beings, one a family merged into unity, the other a cosmic entity merged with death, growing to scales that made planets look small. City-sized became mountain-sized became continent-sized became planet-sized. And still they grew. The gallery had relocated 6 times already, cosmic entities retreating to safe observation distances as the combatants expanded past solar system scale. This is impossible, one of the Celestials said, its voice carrying the weight of genuine shock. The upper limits, another added. They're breaking the upper limits we thought were absolute. Because there were supposed to be limits. Cosmic entities had power, yes, but that power operated within frameworks. The Celestials could reshape matter. The abstracts embodied concepts. Even beings like Oblivion had defined operational parameters. But what was happening now had no framework. The mecha was galaxy-sized now. Spiral patterns running along arms that could wrap around star systems. Eyes that glowed with the combined light of a trillion suns filtered through rainbow death energy. Inside the cockpit that existed in a pocket dimension somehow exempt from the scaling, Love was laughing. Pure 5-year-old joy at being able to imagine something and have it be real. At working together with Mommy and Daddy to do something amazing. At being powerful enough to protect them like they always protected him. The Oblivion abomination matched them size for size, but there was no joy in it. Just rage and grief pouring more and more energy into the construct, trying to overwhelm through sheer power what it couldn't defeat through skill. They breached into overspace. The realm above normal reality where abstract concepts had physical presence. Where the multiverse itself was visible as a vast structure of interconnected universes. And there, in the space between spaces, the mecha grabbed a spiral galaxy and swung it like a discus. Oblivion caught it with 2 hands, void energy corroding through stellar matter, but the impact sent him reeling backward through 3 universe clusters. The abomination roared and grabbed its own galaxy, hurling it back. The mecha batted it aside with 1 massive hand, the galaxy scattering into component stars that rained across dimensional barriers. They're using galaxies as weapons. Eternity said, and even his voice carried wonder. And the family construct is winning, Infinity added. Look at the patterns. Every exchange, they adapt faster. Learn quicker. Because that was the difference. Oblivion was fighting alone. Pouring all his grief and rage and primordial power into a single unified assault. Powerful, yes. Devastating, absolutely. But alone. The mecha had 3 minds working in harmony. Jay's tactical brilliance finding the openings. Domino's probability manipulation ensuring they capitalized on them. And Love's imagination turning every advantage into something more. Family. That was the weapon Oblivion couldn't counter. The mecha caught Oblivion's next strike, twisted, and threw the abomination across overspace hard enough to crack reality. Before the void could recover, Jay had an idea. His dad's signature move. The thing that had saved his life more times than he could count. Through the connection, Domino felt the plan form and grinned. She'd seen Jay's dad fight. Knew exactly what he was thinking. The mecha's right arm began to shift. Energy flowing, concentrating, forming into a new shape. A drill. But not just any drill. A spiral construct galaxy-sized and spinning with enough force to bore through dimensional barriers. Green energy at its core, the Power Stone's raw force given rotational momentum. Love felt what his parents were building and understood instinctively. He'd watched the shows. Seen the drills that pierced the heavens. His imagination fed into the construct, making it more than it should be. Adding spiral patterns that glowed with determination. Making the rotation not just physical but conceptual, drilling through possibility itself. But it wasn't enough yet. Jay felt it, knew what was missing. The drill needed to be more than just power. It needed to be final. He reached deep, past the Infinity Stone's integrated energy, past the stolen cosmic powers, all the way down to the source. His blood. The rainbow blood that was equal parts human stubbornness, cosmic power, and fatherly love. He channeled it into the drill, the chromatic fluid flowing along the spiral patterns and turning the green energy into something else entirely. The drill blazed multicolored now, each of the 6 Infinity Stone colors visible in the rotation, swirling around a core of pure integrated energy. But Domino wasn't finished. She channeled the Death Stone's full authority into the construct, every ounce of death energy she could muster. The drill turned darker at its edges, violet-black power mixing with the rainbow light. Death energy didn't just end things. It made endings certain. Inevitable. Final. The drill that spun before them now wasn't just a weapon. It was an ending given form. The most lethal weapon Oblivion had ever faced, and he'd fought at the edge of the multiverse against horrors that made gods weep. Through the connection, the family spoke as one. Giga. Drill. Breaker. The mecha charged. Oblivion raised all 4 arms, void energy pouring from the abomination in waves that corroded through dimensional barriers. Death authority from Lady Death's essence created zones of absolute ending around him. But the drill kept coming. It pierced through the void energy like it wasn't there. The rotation caught the death zones and pulled them apart, the spiral momentum overwhelming even the authority of ending. The drill struck Oblivion's chest. And tore straight through. The sound was the sound of creation and ending happening simultaneously. The drill bore a whole torso size through the primordial void's construct, through the grief-mad fusion of brother and sister, through layers of reality that tried and failed to absorb the impact. Rainbow light and violet-black death poured into the wound, and where they mixed something unprecedented occurred. The death energy didn't destroy the void substance. It gentled it. Domino had channeled not the violent ending, not the harsh termination, but the peaceful conclusion. The kind of death that came naturally, that was accepted rather than fought. The abomination began to dissolve. Not violently. Not with screaming or resistance. It simply let go. Lady Death's essence separated from Oblivion's void substance, the skeletal remains reforming into her proper shape. Her consciousness, fractured by the merger, pulled itself back together. And Oblivion. Oblivion collapsed. The primordial void's form shrinking, the cosmic scale reducing back to merely immortal, then to merely massive, then to something almost mortal-sized. He hit the ground of overspace hard enough to crack abstract reality, and didn't rise. The mecha stood over him, drill still spinning, ready for another strike if needed. But it wasn't needed. Oblivion was finished. The gallery was silent. Cosmic entities who had witnessed the birth of dimensions, who had seen realities born and die, sat frozen in their seats. Because they had just watched a family, a mortal father and mother and their 5-year-old son, defeat the primordial void in single combat. They had watched that same family destroy nearly the entire multiverse structure in the process, galaxies scattered like broken toys, dimensional barriers shattered, reality itself cracked and bleeding. The fight had been so catastrophic that the damage assessment was still calculating, numbers climbing higher with each passing second. Inside the mecha, Jay and Domino were exhausted. The connection was fading, love's imagination finally reaching its limits. But before they could dispel the construct, before they could check on Oblivion's fallen form, a voice rang out across all of existence. A voice that came from everywhere and nowhere. A voice that even the living tribunal turned to face with something approaching concern. Alright, that's enough fun for a single chapter. Chapter 347, The Men Behind the Story Eye. This is my most ambitious work yet. Enjoy. The voice cut through reality like scissors through silk, and every other sound in the cosmic arena faded to background noise. Alright, that's enough fun for a single chapter. The arena froze. Oblivion hung mid-swing with void energy pouring off him like steam. Domino stood with the Colt raised, death stone blazing violet. Love reached for his father, mouth open in warning. Even the living tribunal's 3 faces locked mid-rotation. Everything except Jay. Jay stood there with rainbow blood still dripping from his shoulder stump and 6 infinity stone resonances pulsing in his chest. He felt confused in a way that went past even his supercomputer of a mind. The arena melted and changed around him without any flash of light or portal or any cosmic mechanism he could identify. It just stopped being the arena and started being somewhere else, as clean as a scene change in a play. He found himself standing in a cluttered backroom. An aggressively normal room that felt wrong after hours of cosmic courts and impossible spaces. Somehow, it felt refreshing, like drinking tap water after months in a desert. Too simple, too small, and too real. Warm lighting from a desk lamp with a cream shade. Bookshelves crammed with paperbacks and hardcovers in no particular order, spines facing every direction like someone had been pulling them out and shoving them back for years. A worn couch with a throw blanket bunched up on one end. And a desk covered in organized chaos. Notebooks stacked 3 high. A keyboard with keys worn smooth at W, A, S, D. A simple laptop whose monitor showed what looked like a document with way too many words, while the side tab displayed a forum thread with nested comments going down for miles. A teacup with a faded blue and white border sat half full and probably cold. Behind the desk sat a man in his mid-20s, with Indian features and wavy hair that needed a trim. His beard looked like it had been shaped with care about 3 days ago and had been coasting since. He wore beige shorts and a t-shirt with some faded band logo Jay didn't recognize, sporting a bit of a gut in the hunched posture that came from spending entire days at a keyboard. He was typing with the steady rhythm of someone in the zone, fingers moving across keys with unconscious rhythm. The clicking filled the room with a sound that was somehow more real than anything Jay had heard in the dimension of manifestations. Jay took a step closer, drawn by what he couldn't name, and the angle shifted enough to see the monitor. His own name was on the screen alongside his actions, his thoughts, the exact sequence of events that had just happened rendered in prose that was both clinical and intimate. He watched the cursor blink at the end of a sentence that read, Jay stood there, rainbow blood still dripping from his shoulder stump, 6 infinity stone resonances pulsing in his chest. Physical cold moved through his sternum as the realization hit. He was reading himself, standing here reading himself in present tense in a document on someone else's screen. The man's fingers moved, keys clicked again as new words appeared, the arena melted. Jay remembered the arena dissolving around him with perfect clarity. The typing and the event had happened simultaneously across 2 different places, and his brain refused to believe what the proof was hinting at. The man stopped typing after hitting enter and turned in his chair with a slow swivel that suggested a carefree author, finally free of his work, had just needed to finish his thought first. When their eyes met, the man's face went through several expressions in rapid succession, genuine surprise, followed immediately by recognition, before settling into a smile that was equal parts welcoming and exciting. Oh, you are here, the man said, gesturing at the couch which Jay noticed had suddenly been straightened, throw blanket folded. Well. This is earlier than I planned. Please, sit. You look like you've had a day. Jay looked down at himself. The rainbow blood was gone. The shoulder stump had become a shoulder again with his arm intact and fingers flexing with the automatic response of limbs that had never been severed. His suit was pristine again, the black patterns unmarred by any evidence of combat with unimaginable beings. He looked back at the screen where the words had just appeared while he was looking away. Jay looked down at himself. The rainbow blood was gone. Who are you? Jay said, his voice coming out flat with a scratch of anxiety underneath it, the residue of having gone through this too recently. Where am I? Where's my son? Where's Dom? We were fighting oblivion and then this voice came and... Hey, hey. The men stood up with stiffness from having been sitting too long and picked up a glass from the desk, already filled with something pale and cold, condensation beating on the outside. Seems like lemonade, from the smell. He held it out. Take a breath. Everyone's fine. I'm just taking a break from my work, so everything's on hold. Nobody's going anywhere, nothing bad is happening to them while you're here. Jay stared at the glass, at the men, at the screen where new words were appearing in real time. Jay stared at the glass. His comic book nerd perk fired up, searching for cross-references. Fourth wall breaks, meta-narratives, beings that operated outside standard reality. Deadpool talked to the audience, and She-Hulk's done the same. The Beyonders existed outside the multiverse proper. The search kept sliding off whatever this was, finding adjacent categories and losing the thread because whatever this was had no category. All searches came back with no results at all. Don't you recognize me? The man said, his voice carrying a note of hurt, like he'd expected a different reaction. Jay took the lemonade partly because his throat was raw from screaming, fighting, and bleeding, partly because it gave him something to do with his hands while his brain caught up. The glass was cold and real, even the lemonade tasted exactly like lemonade, which somehow made the whole thing worse. He studied the men. Young, definitely human passing, with tired eyes, with sagging bags under them that came from repeated and rigorous desk work. No, Jay said finally before adding, because the pieces were assembling into a shape he didn't particularly want to look at directly, should I? A thought suddenly occurred to him, no matter how improbable. Are you the one above all? The men laughed with genuine humor, a snort in the middle that was filled with the absurdity of Jay's statement. Buddy, where did you get that idea? The man was still grinning as he shook his head and settled back into his chair. No. God, no. I'm not. Looks like XYZ did a rubbish job introducing the whole patron situation. Typical. Guy's been doing this for 20,000 years and still skips the important bits. He leaned back in his chair with his hands behind his head in a posture so casually human it made Jay's danger sense build its hum again. I'm ROB. You know, random omnipotent being. He tapped the keyboard. More specifically, I'm the author of this story. Jay's brain short-circuited. Wait, he said as the lemonade glass shook in his hand. Wait. You're, what? The author, ROB said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The person writing your story. Your entire existence, from the moment XYZ showed you that CYOA tablet to right now, this conversation we're having. I've been writing it, following the plotting, posting it chapter by chapter to people who, from your perspective, exist in a completely different layer of reality. He gestured at the second monitor with the forum thread. There's actually a really engaged comment section. Want to see what people think of your character arc? No, Jay said before his brain caught up. Wait, yes. No. What? ROB's expression softened as he reached over to his desk and pulled out one of the notebooks, flipped it open to a page covered in handwritten notes. Jay could see his own name scattered across it, connected to other names with lines and arrows, Domino, Love, Oblivion, Bobby, the whole cosmic web laid out in blue ink and corrections with margin notes that said things like, check power scaling, foreshadow this earlier, and, readers will hate this, do it anyway. Look, ROB said. I know this is a lot. Believe me, I know. There's a whole philosophical question about whether you're real or just a really detailed simulation I've been running. He shrugged. Honestly, I don't have a clean answer for that. But what I can tell you is this, I've been with you since the beginning. Every choice you made, every power you stole, every little moment that led to your character growth from a skeptic powers dealer to a well-rounded human who'd choose to protect someone else instead of playing it safe. I was there, writing it, making it real in the only way I know how. Jay's legs suddenly gave out and fortunately, the couch was there, because his brain seemed to stop functioning to process this for a minute. You're saying. Jay started, stopped, started again. You're saying my entire life. Everything I've done. Every fight, every choice, every moment with Domino and Love, every time I nearly died and didn't. You were, writing it. Yes and no. I didn't create them, ROB said, not quite apologetic. I rescued them from obscurity and put them to work. I didn't create you either. I'm more of a demiurgic power, someone else makes you perfect and innocent, and then I step in and spoil everything. It's a little satanic, I suppose. Jay glanced around, trying to make sense of it. And you're, a person. A regular person. Sitting in a room somewhere that's not even in the Marvel Universe, typing on a keyboard. Pretty much, yeah. And the cosmic trial. Oblivion trying to erase my son. The living tribunal and all those abstracts voting on whether love deserved to exist. That was all. Part of the story, yeah. ROB looked uncomfortable now. Look, I know how that sounds. Like I put you and your family through hell for entertainment. And from a certain angle, that's exactly what I did. But it's more complicated than that. Jay's body went still for a moment. Then, in the next instant, he decked the guy across the left cheek. Without thinking, he used polarity to activate decay powers, turning this human into a cluster of cancer cells and rot in a slow, agonizing death. For a moment, there was ecstasy. Pure, overwhelming satisfaction at finally hurting the target of his anger. Then terror dawned. He realized he'd made a promise to himself to never turn Tommy's pure healing aura into a weapon of decay and disease. But wait. How had he even used this power? He remembered giving it to Bonk back in the arena. And finally, the deepest terror of all crashed over him. Jay was not a cruel and cold-blooded murderer. He had never and would never kill someone just for claiming they were writing him. Of course he was in Marvel. Of course the one above all was constantly writing them all into creation. This wasn't. A slow clap came from behind. Jay whirled around to find ROB completely fine, standing and walking toward him with an almost casual gait. Shocked, Jay turned back to look at ROB's decayed body on the floor. There was nothing there. What's going on? Jay demanded, his voice shaking. ROB smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. That was a demonstration. To show you that I really am the author, constantly writing your actions and reactions. He paused, studying Jay's expression. Plus, I thought you deserved to relieve your rightful anger. Even if it was just for a moment. Jay laughed. It was the laugh of someone, past disbelief into hysteria. He'd spent so long fighting gods and cosmic forces, not to mention stealing their authorities while his body was being battered and bloody, and the entire time he'd been a character in someone's story. His son's tears had been plot points, and Domino's ascension to death had been a narrative beat. Every moment of fear, pain, and desperate love had been typed on a keyboard by a guy with bubblegut in this shoddy room. More complicated, Jay repeated. The lemonade glass was empty though he didn't remember drinking it. Right. Sure. Tell me how it's more complicated. Go on, then. ROB was quiet for a moment before minimizing the document he'd been working on and pulling up a different file. The title read, Chapter 183, Judgment Without Mercy. He scrolled down and Jay could see his own name repeated over and over, could see Love's, could see the scene rendered in prose, the moment his 5-year-old son stood alone in a cosmic courtroom while beings older than time itself voted on whether he deserved to exist. I spent 6 days on this chapter, ROB said quietly. Kept stopping, kept deleting sections, kept asking myself if I really needed to put love through this. If there was another way to get to the resolution without. He trailed off. Without writing a scene where a child cries because people in power are debating his right to live. Jay was very still. But you wrote it anyway. Yeah, I did, ROB confirmed. Because the story needed it. Because without that trial, without that vote, the victory doesn't mean anything. The ending, whether it be happy or sad, has to be earned. Earned. Jay's voice came out flat, the register it went to when he was holding a large amount of anger and hadn't yet decided what to do with it. By making my son cry. By putting him in front of beings who wanted him erased. By writing his fear and his confusion and his. He stopped, barely holding his tongue, because his pragmatism stopped him from messing with the being who transmigrated him and gave him such powers. You chose that. You sat here and chose to write that. Yes. Why? ROB met his eyes. Because the alternative was worse. He pulled up a folder and Jay could see the file names. He read them one at a time. Chapter 150, alt_ending_the_clone_dies.docs. Jay's hand went flat on the couch cushion beside him, fingers pressing down into the fabric as he kept reading. Chapter 171, Dominoes_sacrifice.docs. Chapter 183, verdict_erasure.docs. Chapter 190, J_loses_everything.docs. Dozens of them, all marked with dates, all labeled deleted or alt or scrapped, and Jay's heart stopped for a moment before restarting when reading the words "Love Dies" on a hard drive that belonged to someone else. The words existing in any form, deleted or not, in a folder on this desk, in this room, in a layer of reality he had no access to and no control over. Jay's voice shook. Do you know what you've done to me? Of course I know. I wrote your grief and your rage and your acceptance. It added drama. All stories need drama. ROB said, his voice very quiet now. Love dying in your arms while you screamed his name and his body dissolved into nothing. Domino never making it back from Vormer with her last thought being your name, wondering if you'd remember her. The living tribunal pronouncing love's erasure and you being powerless to stop it. ANS, so on and on and on. ROB said after a pause, it's easy to get a cheap emotional shock by killing popular characters. But that's not fair. No, Jay's voice cracked. That's not. ROB's expression softened for a moment. He told a small, private story. One of my dogs died last year. An infection got him. He suffered for weeks. His name was Hammy. You find the name familiar? Jay, for once, was silent as he remembered Vice President Rodriguez's daughter Jenna, whom he healed, and her best friend, her dog, Hammy. Your world is so much simpler than his, ROB said in a low voice. It can be invaded by aliens or suffer catastrophes and everything comes back good as new. There's no problem that can't be solved by some idiot in tights. Don't come complaining to me about what's fair and what's not, Jay said, resentful. Fair enough, ROB said dryly. He opened one of the files and Jay saw prose, saw his own name attached to actions he'd never taken and words he'd never said. Saw himself holding Love's body. Saw himself screaming. The prose was good, which was the horror of it. It wasn't a rough draft or a placeholder. It was written with care, with the same professionalism and emotional weight as every chapter Jay had apparently lived through, and the love in it was exactly his son, Love, with the way he reached for Jay's collar when he was scared and the sound he made. The scene went on for 4 more paragraphs after Jay started screaming, and they were the 4 worst paragraphs Jay had ever read. He saw Domino's final moments on Vormer, alone with the Soul Stone's light fading. I deleted them, ROB said. Rewrote them. Some chapters 1 did 3, 4 times before I found the version where they were given a fair chance, where you were given a fair chance. He looked at Jay. The trial was hard, the vote was painful, but it wasn't this. And that's why I wrote it. Jay didn't say anything for a moment as he looked at the file name, chapter 150, alt_ending_the_clone_dies.docs, at chapter 150 from months ago. The file had existed from the moment they found Love in the blast center, proposing how different their lives would be. You wrote Love's tears, he said finally. Yes. And you chose those every single time. Yes. Jay stood up, and the Infinity Stone's multicolored light came on all at once, columns of 6-colored resonance hitting the ceiling and trying to break it apart, but the reality simply didn't budge, as if looking at an ant and scoffing at him for even trying to bend it. His voice, when it came, was more silent and to the point despite the shock. You sat here and decided that cosmic beings would vote on whether my 5-year-old son deserved to exist. For some story structure. That's what you said. ROB's hands went still on the keyboard. For what? Still quiet, the delivery of someone who has been in enough genuine conflict to know that volume isn't a performance. What narrative purpose justified making Love cry himself sick? What story beat required Bonk to bleed out on the cold floor in front of his friend? What story beat required Domino to watch our son be judged like an experiment that needed approval? What plot point was worth putting a 5-year-old in front of the living tribunal and Oblivion and every bloody abstract in the multiverse while they decided he shouldn't exist? He was shaking now, and his eyes, now glowing rainbow light, were on ROB. The resolution. The resolution doesn't erase what you put them through. For one beat where Jay held it in. You wrote every tear. Every moment of fear. Every second, Love stood there thinking maybe his mother shouldn't have saved him. You chose that. You could have written anything, any other conflict, any other crisis, any other set of stakes. You chose to put my son on trial for existing, and you did it knowing exactly what it would produce because that's the job. Isn't it? Chapter 348, The Men Behind the Story 2. The last 2 words came out as a roar. ROB was quiet for a long moment before pulling up the forum thread on the second tab and scrolling to a specific section below his notes. Image here. Comments, dozens of them, all timestamped during and after the chapter. This is too dark, I'm out. When does the grimdark actually end? Please tell me the author isn't setting up a tragedy arc. If Love dies, I'm dropping this, and I will find you and smack you up real good. Why does Jay always get to win? There are no real stakes. I was really confused why he tried the whole power broker move when he knew it would come out. When does Jay actually lose something that stays lost? ROB scrolled further. The Love accepting them as his parents chapters destroy me every single time. I've been binging this since 12, and the White Christmas arc is the best thing in this whole story. I don't care how long this takes, I just need them to be okay. This family is the reason I get up to read at 6 a.m. before work. He looked at Jay. You think this is easy? ROB's voice had an edge now, not defensive but closer to controlled frustration, the tone of someone who has been in an argument with dozens of different people at once for months and is choosing carefully which part of it to show. I have readers telling me the story is too dark, and readers telling me you need to suffer more. I have readers who want you to lose love because that's realistic consequences, and readers who will quit and threaten to hurt me in real life if he gets a scraped knee. I have comments from people who've been reading since chapter 12, getting up at 6 in the morning to read before work, saying this family is the reason they do it. He closed the thread. And I had to decide. Do I write what they expect, or do I write what you deserve? Do I give them their grimdark tragedy, or do I give you your family? Jay was standing still now, the rainbow aurora dimming. That's not an answer. That's just an excuse. It's both, Rob said. I put you through hell because the story needed stakes. Because without the trial, without the vote and most importantly, without the real possibility of loss, the victory means nothing. But I also pulled back. I deleted the versions where you lost and chose the ending where you get to keep them. He didn't look away from Jay. I chose you. Over the grimdark version, over what would have been easier to defend as serious and elevated writing. I chose to give you a happy ending. Jay looked at the deleted files folder, at the dozens of alternate chapters where everything went wrong. How many times did you write love dying? Rob's jaw tightened. 17. Across different chapters and different scenarios. Oblivion succeeding, the vote going the other way, the arena fight going wrong, Arisham's judgment standing and so on. And Domino. 12 times. Most of them on Vormer, a few in the cosmic trial, one where she traded herself for love's freedom, and you had to. He stopped. You don't want to know. Jay did want to know, and he absolutely didn't. Every single one of those, Jay said slowly, you wrote. You typed out my grief, my rage, and you went into detail on it because that's what you do, isn't it? You don't do rough and approximate. You do detailed and precise work. And worst of all, you spent hours on those chapters making it as exact as possible. Yes. Why? If you were just going to delete them, why write them at all? Rob looked at folders for a long moment. Because I needed to know what it would cost, he said, the sheepishness gone from his voice now, with what was left being simpler. What would it do to you? Whether the story could survive it. Whether you could. He pulled up one of the deleted chapters and scrolled to the end. This one ends with you catatonic. Love is gone and you just stop. Domino tries to reach you, but you're not there anymore because the person you were died with love, and what's left is just a body of stolen powers bundled with grief. Jay felt cold in his chest, not fear but the echo of a thing that didn't happen yet came close enough to leave a mark. I wrote that, Rob continued, and I couldn't publish it, couldn't do that to you. So I deleted it and started over and wrote a version where you lived, where you got to keep him. He closed the file. But I had to write the death first, he said quietly. I had to understand what it would cost because you can't write a meaningful victory without knowing exactly what defeat looks like, and you can't try to give someone a happy ending without understanding precisely what you're saving them from. Jay sat back down with the rainbow light completely fading now, not because the anger had resolved but because the rest of him was tired. The powers that be, he said after a moment. I killed them. The abstract that governed all magic in the multiverse. And when they died, every magic user in the multiverse lost a piece of their connection to the source, Rob finished. The Ancient One, Wong, future Doctor Strange. Every sorcerer, mystic, and practitioner across every reality. They don't know it yet, but they will. Their spells will be harder, their connection to the mystical realms weaker, and some of them will spend the rest of their lives wondering why the thing that used to come easily doesn't anymore. He pulled up a file titled, Consequences for Abstract Deaths. The Goblin Force governed the entropy cycle, so its absence means the natural decay function across realities is running without a governor. Matter will still cycle, but the principle that kept it running correctly is gone, and the realities furthest from the eighth cosmos' center will feel it first. A drift that becomes a collapse given enough time. He then turned to look at Jay steadily. The Griever at the end of all things governed civilizational end states, the cosmic function that ensured societies that had run their course completed their arc without dragging their neighbors into the wreckage. Without her, dying civilizations won't stop. They'll just keep going past the point where stopping would have been clean, and the spillover is being calculated right now by beings that are very unhappy about it. Think of the Eldari from Warhammer 40k, but give it the infinitely bigger scale of Marvel. And that last sentence sent a shiver down Jay's spine, who finally understood the truly horrible consequences of his actions. He closed the file. You wanted to protect your family and I don't blame you for that, but every victory has a cost, and this one is being paid by people all across the multiverse you'll never meet. Jay's hands were on his knees as he looked at the floor, avoiding Rob's eyes, giving himself somewhere else concrete to put his attention while the weight of it landed. That's on you, he said finally. You wrote me killing them. Rob didn't move away from it. No, his voice was firm. I wrote the situation. The cosmic trial, the arena, the fight. But you chose to kill the powers that be. I gave you options. You could have incapacitated them, absorbed their power temporarily, found another way. And don't come at me with you had no other way, you literally had the best power anyone could ask for, the comic nerd perk, giving you access to all meta-knowledge to not just glide through but achieve the peak of power itself. He leaned forward. The tactical decision to execute rather than contain, that calculation that said permanent removal was safer than temporary incapacitation, that was yours. I've read your chapters, and that's how you think, that's the paranoid survival thinking you've adopted since chapter 2. I didn't put that in you. Bullshit. You controlled. Did I control you, loving Domino? Straight across with no apology in it. Did I force you to adopt love? Did I write the way you talk to your son, the jokes, the way you explain things to him like he's a small adult who deserves the real answer, the way you hold him when he's scared, the way you and Domino move around each other? He shook his head. I gave you the page, and you filled it with meaning. Every choice that mattered, that's yours. Every person you became, that's yours. Jay opened his mouth and closed it. Because the thing was, he remembered making those choices. Remembered the rage about the powers that be, remembered deciding that permanent removal was cleaner because otherwise it would mean the threat that could come back, and he'd been operating on the axiom that threats which could come back did come back. Even if someone else had written the scenario, the choice had felt like his, had been his, and the question of whether those were the same thing was going to be sitting with him for a long time. The living tribunal, Jay said after a moment with sudden hope. He's supposed to prevent multiversal collapse. That's literally his entire function. Why didn't he intervene? Rob scratched his beard while looking genuinely sheepish. Because having him intervene mid-fight would have been anticlimactic. All this build-up, all this tension, and then the cosmic referee just steps in and calls it off. He grimaced. The readers would have been pissed since they'd invested chapters of reading into this conflict and wanted to see it through. So, I let it play out. Jay stared at him. You let the multiverse start collapsing, he said with his voice very flat, because it would have been anticlimactic to stop it. When you say it like that, it sounds bad. Because it is bad. I know. Rob held up both hands in surrender. Look, I'm not saying I made the perfect choice, but I'm also not going to let the multiverse actually collapse. That's why I pulled you out mid-fight. He reached into his pocket. I'm offering you a deal. And pulled out a small object and held it out on his palm. It looked like a marble. The warmth of it hit Jay from 3 feet away, heavier than it looked, with the weight that wasn't even comprehensible despite his state. Jay reached out and took it as the warmth transferred to his palm immediately with the give of the glass and the heft of the energy compressed into his closed fist. Inside it, when he really looked carefully, he could see the architecture of a place that didn't exist yet but wanted to, colorful galaxies in there and such beautiful star systems, the blueprint of a cosmos waiting to be inhabited. What? Jay said slowly, is that? Your way out, Rob said as he rolled a second marble between his fingers before pocketing it again. Think of it as a reality marble. A self-contained universe completely separated from the Marvel multiversal structure, where no cosmic entities can extend their influence without your express permission. No trials on your son's right to exist, since he's out of their express domain, that means no oblivion showing up to ruin summer. He held out his hand. Just you, Domino, Love, and whoever else you want to bring along. Your own universe with your own rules. The home you always wanted to build with her, except real now, permanent and protected. Jay closed his fist around the marble and sat with the weight and warmth of it. And what about the trial, he asked. The fight. We just drilled a hole in the unholy fusion of Oblivion and Lady Death. Resolved, Rob said simply while clicking his fingers. The moment you accept this and leave, the trial ends. Living Tribunal steps in like he should have from the start, does his actual job, and cleans up the mess. Oblivion gets banished back to the outer void, permanently now with the duty to protect the multiverse from the unnamed ones and the cosmic abstracts who died stay dead unfortunately, but the structure stabilizes since new ones would rise to take their place and the multiverse ultimately survives. Just like that. Just like that. Jay looked at the marble and then back at Rob. What's the catch? Rob's expression went serious. The catch is that you don't get to be the hero anymore. The multiverse still has holes where abstracts died. Every magic user in every reality lost when you won, and they'll feel it for the rest of their lives and never know why. Not to mention the unimaginable and horrible consequences of your mania that will affect the future of the 8th cosmos till the 9th. He closed the document. The reality marble fixes everything for you and them by effectively removing you from the cause and effect of the narrative, he said. Gives you and your family peace, safety, and everything you've been fighting for, but it doesn't restore what was lost. Your happy ending comes at a cost to everyone else. Jay looked at the marble. And you're making me choose. I'm giving you what you've always wanted, Rob said. Freedom, family, and safety. The life that was supposed to be yours before the multiverse decided you were a useful variable. Yes, you have to choose it knowing what it costs, and that's the only honest way I can offer it. He pulled up the forum thread again and scrolled slowly. Jay needs to face real consequences. The MC is too powerful, there are literally no stakes. Real heroism means putting others before yourself, always. If he takes the easy out, I'm done. Further scrolling down, he saw more. I just want him to be happy. I just want all of them to be happy. Love deserves a childhood. Domino has given everything. Let her rest. Rob looked back at Jay. They want you to stay, he said. Want you to be the hero who saves everyone, who fixes the damage, who puts the multiverse before his own happiness. That's what heroes do, right? Sacrifice themselves for the greater good. He gestured at the marble. But I'm not writing that story. I'm writing the one where you have the choice to choose your family, where you take the happy ending and let someone else save the world, where you finally get to stop fighting. Jay was quiet for a long time. What about Domino? He asked finally. She's death now. How does she fulfill her duties if we're in a separate continuity? Rob's smile widened a fraction. Already thought of that. The Queen of Nevers is your patron, isn't she? She can teach her the full scope of her new role, and Domino will slowly and eventually learn to channel her authority properly, and ultimately create an avatar to handle the day-to-day death business while her real self stays with you in love. In time, she'll be fully omnipresent in her domain, present everywhere that needs her but never away from her family. That's... Jay started and stopped. That actually works. I do occasionally come up with solutions that aren't disasters waiting to happen, Rob said as he leaned back. Look, Jay. I know this is a lot. I know finding out you're a character in a story isn't exactly the revelation anyone wants, but I need you to understand. He picked up one of the notebooks again, the one with all the plot notes and character arcs and carefully planned story beats. Every choice you made was yours, Rob said quietly. I put you in situations, yeah. Created the cosmic trial, brought oblivion into play, made your life complicated, dangerous and often unfair. But how you responded. The decision to fight for love instead of running. Choosing to swallow, fucking infinity stones rather than play it safe. Loving Domino the way you do. He set the notebook down. That was all you. I gave you the page and you filled it with meaning, and that meaning is real even if the page isn't. Tell me one thing, Jay said quietly and desperately. Am I real or what? Of course you're real, Rob said. We wouldn't be talking if you weren't. You existed long before I wrote about you. If you're lucky, you'll stay young when I'm old or dead. You're more real than I am. Jay looked around at the mundane room and the outside from the window. Your world must be terrible. It's so gray and bleak. How can you live like that without superheroes? Rob smiled, suddenly playful. If you want superheroes, I can give you superheroes. How about that? Will the excitement never end? He gestured, and the monitors swirled with images of capes and masks. Expansive cosmic battles dying left and right in blood and gore made artistic. Which made Jay recoil. My God, what have you done to all those people? They're not part of your story, Rob said, uneasy. I only showed them in to convey the idea of what makes books nowadays more interesting. It's a haphazard way to write a life, don't you think? Jay looked at the marble in his hand and thought about love, about the way his son looked at him with absolute trust even after everything, and thought about Domino and her steady presence, the way she'd become death itself to protect their family. He thought about the magic users he'd never meet who were struggling with powers that didn't work the way they used to. He thought about being a hero versus being a father. I spent my whole first life, Jay said slowly, trying to escape. Escape my mother's expectations, escape the path other people laid out for me, escape the feeling of being trapped in someone else's story. He looked at Rob, not with the anger from earlier but with a feeling that was going to take a while to name properly. Finding out I literally am in someone else's story is perfect, actually. Very on brand for my particular brand of irony. So what do you want to do? Rob asked. Jay held the marble up to the desk lamp's light where the galaxies inside it caught it and scattered it, warm gold through the glass, a universe waiting to happen sitting in his palm like a promise solid enough to hold. Let the future Doctor Strange figure out his own magic problems, Jay said. Let the multiverse find its balance. I've been fighting since the day I got here, and I'm done. I want to watch my son grow up. I want to grow old with Domino. I want to stop waiting for the next crisis that ruin everything. He looked at Rob. I choose this. I choose them. Rob smiled with the satisfaction of someone who had spent months building toward this moment and was genuinely, quietly relieved to finally be here, relieved after writing 17 versions of the worst thing and getting to end on this one instead. You know what the best part is? Rob said, chuckling. You're still paranoid, still running checks on a room full of books, still waiting for the catch inside the catch. That's who you are, aren't you? Yeah, Jay admitted. I am. But here's what I can tell you as the person who writes this story, Rob said as he leaned forward. You don't need to be paranoid anymore. This is it, this is the resolution. I'm giving you the happily ever after with no catches, no hidden threats, or plot twists where it all goes wrong in chapter 200. You get to let go now. Jay felt relief in his chest that he hadn't felt in months, real relief that comes when you finally get permission to stop fighting. You promise, he asked with vulnerability now. You actually promise this is it? That I get to take my family, and nothing horrible happens to them. I promise, Rob said, and there was weight in how he said it, with the authority of a creator, which made it feel like the most binding contract Jay had ever heard. You've earned it, Rob continued. All three of you. Every tear Love cried, every moment Domino spent terrified for his safety, every time you nearly died protecting them. You've earned this peace. So go, take it and try to be happy. I told you about Hammy, right? I fed him, took him to the vet. I prayed. There was a part of me, the part that observes and writes, rubbing his hands saying, if he dies, I'll be able to use it in the story. It'll add poignancy. We'll stop at nothing. A long silence fills the space between them. A terrible honesty between creator and creation. We writers thought by making your world more violent we'd make it more realistic, more appealing to adults. Why does blood and torture and anguish still excite us? He looked down. Maybe, for once, we could try to be kind. He looked at Jay softly. I'm out of space, out of time. I haven't said anything worthwhile. And I have nothing left to say. There's nothing wrong with you, Rob said. Get up. It's only a story. It's not, Jay said, voice rising. It's not only a story. It's my life, Jay said. It's Love's life. It's Domino's life. Rob listened. The room hummed with the soft sound of his laugh. You've earned this peace. So go. Go home. Try to be happy. The room began to dissolve gently as the light changed gradually enough. The teacup went first, then the worn spot on the W key, then the notebook with Jay's name in blue ink and arrows going everywhere. The forum thread on the second tab with its 6 a.m. readers, its grimdark advocates and the one comment that just said, I just want them to be happy, blinked out while the couch was still warm where Jay had been sitting. Rob himself started to blur around the edges, becoming translucent. Wait, Jay said. One more thing. Rob paused the dissolution and the room held, half-faded, waiting. Yeah. Jay looked at him, at this young and definitely real guy who'd spent months writing Jay's life, who'd typed out his worst fears and deleted them, who'd written 17 versions of Love Dying and chosen none of them. Thank you, Jay said, and he started to say more and didn't because the full version of it was too large and some things were just true without needing the full accounting, what he'd been given, what it meant. Yeah. Thank you. Rob's smile went softer. You're welcome, he said. Now go. They're waiting for you. Chapter 349, yes. Jay's vision stabilized. The ordinary room dissolved around him and the cosmic arena returned. Oblivion lay separated from Lady Death's remains. The Earthen heroes had stopped fighting. They'd seen the gap in power between Jay's family and Oblivion and understood their combat had been theater. Jay saw his son. And he finally saw his wife. Well, she wasn't his wife yet. He needed to fix that. Domino caught his expression. What's up with that silly smile? Jay didn't answer. The living tribunal was rising from his throne, all three faces turning toward the field with the measured authority of a Supreme Court reconvening. Ready to exercise jurisdiction now that Rob's constraint had lifted. Ready to render judgment. Jay looked at him for 1 second. Then he crushed the reality marble. White light blazed so intensely that even Master Order and the Watchers had to shield themselves. When it faded, Jay and everyone on his side were gone. They arrived on an endless green plain. Fresh grass under clean air. The sky was blue in a way that suggested this universe was deciding what blue meant. No atmosphere had filtered this light before. No eye had seen this green. It was a universe that had been waiting. Thousands of heroes, mutants, mystics, and abstract beings stood looking around in confusion. Love tugged Jay's sleeve. Dad, where are we? We still need to fight. Jay went to one knee and gathered him up. He just held him. Not checking for injuries, not battle-ready. The other kind. The one with no tactical function. Love's face pressed against his shoulder, and Jay could feel him breathing. He kissed his head, his temple, his cheek. The parents' inventory to confirm via touch that their child was whole. Love understood in 3 seconds that his father wasn't going anywhere. The 5-year-old who had built a galaxy-scale mecha out of love and grief grabbed Jay's collar with both fists and held on. I missed you so much, Dad. I was so afraid, He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Domino joined the hug and smoothed Love's hair. We're good, bae. We're done. And if anyone ever deploys this kind of operation against this family again, her voice carrying the level register of someone who had become death itself, I will personally guarantee they never draw breath in any reality I oversee. Mama, promises. Jay laughed. You don't need to worry about anyone causing problems anymore. Domino pulled back, still combat ready. You're going to explain that right now. This is not the moment for cryptic. Jay stood with Love against his hip and turned to address the thousands watching. He amplified his voice. Everyone. First, I want to thank each of you. During our biggest crisis, you chose to side with us. You put your lives at risk to save our son. He bowed his head. Thank you. Love, surprised by his dad's sudden action, wobbled into his own bow. Domino gave a curt nod, mindful of her new station as death. The Marauders, the cult of the Lightbringer, and others whose lives Jay had changed immediately protested the bow. It was the right thing to do, they said. They were paying him back. Sue Storm raised her hand. I hate to be a downer while everyone's in a cheerful mood, but where are we? And what happened to Oblivion's forces? Last I knew, we were still engaged. Shouldn't we get ready for incoming attacks from the remaining survivors of his camp? Jay gave her a respectful nod, acknowledging her question. She'd earned the question after all. She'd been terrified for Love and had deployed into a cosmic killing field anyway. Eternity interjected before Jay could explain. Don't worry about them, child. I can sense it. This ground is not under my jurisdiction. It stands outside the structural framework of our multiverse entirely. The Queen of Nevers tilted her head with the attention she gave to outcomes that had collapsed from potential into actual. She had never seen this moment before, and for her, this was all but certain of a single possibility. You met him, didn't you? She asked Jay. Without his express intent, what you have built here belongs to no jurisdiction I know. It is genuinely new. She paused. I have not encountered genuinely new in some time. Infinity ran the calculation in 2 seconds and confirmed it. The Phoenix Force extended its awareness and found no ceiling or boundary. Eternity listened for his own resonance and heard nothing. This universe didn't know his name yet. Jay shrugged with both hands. I can neither confirm nor deny. A few laughs rippled through the group. Jay explained that this was an isolated universe outside the scope of cosmic entities and their rules. Finally free to be with his family without constant danger looming. And most importantly, I can bring people here or send them back anywhere I want. Sue and Jean relaxed visibly. Love was partially their son, and they'd hated the thought of him growing up without his siblings or human connection. The crowd murmured. The logistics of a new universe settling over them like field orders. What do we do? Where do we go? What does this mean for everything we left behind? Jay smiled. No need to worry, everyone will be returned to their home, but first, celebrations are in order. But before that, I have a very important question to ask. The crowd went silent. Future Nate Gray and Franklin Richards remembered what this moment was and how important it was to the history of the universe. We are absolutely not missing this, he said as both Franklin and Nate got their cameras out. Jay turned to Domino. He opened his hand and, surprisingly, the Death Stone sat in his palm, violet and black, pulling light toward itself. Domino's hand went to her ankh necklace before she'd consciously decided to. The weight wasn't there. How did you? He reached into his other pocket. The ring was black in the same signature as the Death Stone energy. Jay had commissioned it during his second visit to Vormer. He had been carrying it since. He fitted the stone into the slot now and watched Domino mind still catching up to what was happening. Jay, is this really? Her voice had gone quiet. Not soft. Domino's voice didn't go soft. But soft, now understanding when the stakes were high enough that every word needed to carry its exact weight. Jay went down on one knee and extended his hand. He looked up at her. Nina Thurman. You're the mother of my child and the love of my life. We've had one hell of a ride together, haven't we? All those adventures, the crazy times, the hard times too. We've fought, we've fallen apart, but somehow we always find our way back to each other. You keep me grounded when everything else goes to hell. You remind me what it means to be human, to feel something real. I don't want to lose that again. I don't want to lose you. So, will you marry me? Domino's face changed as she finally processed what and where this was happening. She was shaking when she said it. Yes. Jay stood and slipped the ring onto her finger. Meanwhile, the crowd erupted in the register of thousands who had fought through a cosmic killing field alongside this family and were now watching the thing they fought for actually happen. It was loud in a way a new universe had never heard. The sound had nowhere to echo yet, so it filled everything. Future Franklin snapped his fingers. Flowers rained from the sky while little cherubs made of solid golden light appeared overhead as heroic and cheerful music swelled across the plain. Future Nate used telekinesis to transmute atoms and produce champagne for every person present. Where he wasn't sure of biology, the glass adjusted. Where the entity didn't have hands, the glass floated at the right height. Nate Gray had grown up with too much diversity for it to even be a bother. The Ancient One moved through the crowd with the authority of a mother who had watched Jay fight, bleed and make impossible choices across her son's life, and realized somewhere along the way that he was hers to be proud of. She used transmutation to create food for the feast. As tables filled with the heartiest feast appeared in neat rows at the edge of the crowd. Domino jumped on Jay the second the ring was on her finger, wrapping her legs around his waist and kissing him. Yes, she said between kisses. Yeah. Obviously. You absolute disaster. Jay kissed her back and pulled Love into his arms. The kid had watched the whole thing with focused gravity, both hands pressed flat against his own cheeks. When Jay pulled him in, he made a snorting sound that was indicative of his relief and joy. He grabbed hold of both of them at once. Jay turned to the crowd with both Nina and Love in his arms and yelled while beaming. She said yes. The crowd roared. Congratulations. And in the back of it, if you were listening for it, Domino's voice, small, unguarded, and belonging only to the three of them. Yes. Chapter 350, The Gift of Reality. 3 months later. Jay stood in the kitchen watching steam curl up from 2 cups of chai as the kettle clicked off. He'd built the house himself, turning down Reed's tech solutions and Sue's force field suggestions with a polite shake of his head while the Ancient One raised an eyebrow and nodded in understanding. When his kids asked about the house someday, he wanted to point at the boards and nails and say he'd built this with his own hands. He poured the chai and added honey to Domino's cup before carrying them outside to where she sat on the porch with her feet up. Out in the field, Love rode on Bonk's back, the dino having grown truck-sized at the boy's request and making galloping sounds that sent Love into shrieking laughter. Careful. Domino called out. You fall and scrape your knee, I'm not kissing it better. Yes you will. Love shouted back. Yeah, Domino said quietly, a smile tugging at her lips. I will. Jay handed her the chai and sat beside her so they could watch Love play in a universe that existed because they'd fought for it. Domino sipped her chai thoughtfully before speaking. I've been thinking about the wedding. Jay leaned forward, his mind already racing through the weeks of planning he'd done with sketches and guest lists and Bobby on speed dial while Wade and Peter fought over who got to officiate. Yeah. Did you decide on the flowers? Because I was thinking. We need to delay it. Jay's cup wobbled in his hands as confusion washed over him. What? Why? Domino took his hand and placed it on her stomach, covering it with her own warm palm. I want to fit in my wedding dress in the pictures. There was a beat of silence as Jay's mind caught up with what she was saying, his hand staying where it was while hers kept it pressed against her. The teacup slipped from his fingers and shattered on the porch, though he didn't notice because he was already pulling Domino close and burying his face in her shoulder. No words came, just the overwhelming need to hold her while she held him back and waited. After a long moment, her grip shifted slightly. Jay. You okay? Say something. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes wet with tears he didn't bother hiding. Is it real? Domino cupped his face gently between her hands. Yeah, baby. It's real. He kissed her with everything he had, and when they parted, he was smiling through tears. Best gift you could have given me. Dad. Love stood at the edge of the porch with one hand on Bonk's neck, looking between Jay's tears and the broken cup and his mother with growing concern. What happened? Jay wiped his eyes and opened his arms wide. I'm good, buddy. Really good, and I have news. Love tilted his head curiously as he approached. You're going to be a big brother. Love's eyes went wide as the word came out in a whisper. Really? Really, Domino confirmed with a warm smile. Love stared for 2 heartbeats before throwing his arms around Jay's neck with explosive enthusiasm. I'm gonna be the best big brother. I'll teach them everything. How to fly. How to make galaxies. He paused, reconsidering. How to pet Bonk the right way. Bonk barked and wagged so hard his hindquarters wiggled while Jay laughed and pulled both Love and Domino into a hug that felt like coming home. The baby shower happened 2 months later with Sue handling decorations that made balloons float and change colors while the cake hovered without support and streamers rearranged themselves when people walked under them. Jean brought gifts from the X-Men including baby clothes that would grow with the child, a crib Rouge built and Hank modified to play lullabies, and a mobile with holographic stars showing real constellations. The Ancient One brought a wooden rattle wrapped in cloth, explaining that it was enchanted to always return so a child shouldn't lose their favorite toy. Domino hugged her without thinking, and the Ancient One, who'd lived centuries and rarely showed affection, hugged back with surprising warmth. Bobby wheeled in a cooler containing 17 flavors of ice cream, though these weren't random selections but specific ones Domino had mentioned in passing over the last few months. Small comments about cravings she didn't expect anyone to remember, yet Bobby had kept a list and tracked down every single one, including a regional brand that didn't exist in this universe anymore. Domino started crying, which made Bobby panic. "They're good flavors, I promise." Jay had to sit down because he was laughing too hard while Domino hugged Bobby and continued crying. Love made a banner in crayon that read, "Welcome baby," with the E backwards, and Jay hung it above the crib with such fierce protectiveness that when Reed offered to fix the spelling, Jay said no in a tone that ended the conversation immediately. Jay built the nursery by hand without using his powers, just wood and nails and determination. Reed watched for 10 minutes before offering to design a self-assembling bot, but Jay declined while hammering. "Thanks, but I need to do this myself. I want to build it with my hands." Reed nodded with understanding. "I built Franklin's crib the same way and took 3 tries. Sue still teases me about the uneven leg." Jay smiled at the shared experience. "Then I'm in good company." The nursery came together with pale yellow walls and a bookshelf Love kept filling with his favorite stories because he was convinced his baby sister needed to know about Captain Underpants. Jay carved a rocking chair with constellations etched in the armrests, and above the crib he hung a mobile he'd made himself rather than using Hank's holographic one. Something simpler felt right, so he painted wooden stars and moons in different colors that spun in a breeze existing only in this universe's still-developing physics. One evening, Domino found Jay standing in the nursery doorway just staring at what he'd built. "You okay?" "Yeah." His voice came out quiet and thick with emotion. "6 months ago I thought I'd lost everything, and now." He didn't finish because his eyes said everything his words couldn't. Delivery day arrived with the Ancient One preparing a birthing chamber where time moved differently and pain could be managed without being eliminated entirely. Jay paced in the hallway while Bobby tried to reassure him that Domino had the Ancient One, Sue Storm, and Jean Grey, which was the most qualified medical team in existence. "I know, but I should be in there." The door opened and Sue stepped out smiling. "You can come in." Jay moved fast enough that he might have bent space itself. Inside, Domino sat propped against pillows looking exhausted and radiant simultaneously while cradling the tiniest person Jay had ever seen, wrapped in a sky-blue blanket. "Hey," Domino said softly. "Come meet your daughter." Jay crossed the room and sat on the bed's edge as Domino transferred the precious bundle to his arms. She was impossibly small with tiny fingers curling against his chest and a delicate nose and eyelids closed peacefully, her dark and white hair already showing her mother's unique coloring. Jay's breath caught in his throat. "She's perfect," he whispered reverently. "She is," Domino agreed with a tired smile. "Maya," Jay said, testing the name on his tongue. "God's reality. Our reality." The baby stirred at his voice and her tiny hand flexed as if reaching for him. Jay looked at Domino with tears streaming down his face. "Thank you." Domino intertwined her fingers with his. "We made her together as our gift to each other." "Still," Jay said, his voice breaking slightly. "Thank you." 6 months later, they got married in the same field where Jay had proposed under a sky that had learned blue through patient observation. Sue and Jean handled decorations so flowers shifted colors beneath an arch woven from branches blessed by the Phoenix Force. The Ancient One officiated, leaving both Wade and Peter looking dismayed at being passed over. Jay stood at the altar in a black suit, and Bobby stood beside him as bestman while grinning like an idiot. The music began more gently than the Queen of Never had ever composed specifically for this moment. Love appeared first, pushing Maya's stroller with both hands and showing intense concentration from days of practice. The stroller had ribbons and fresh flowers woven through its frame, and inside Maya slept wrapped in a blanket that held starlight itself. Love scattered flower petals with each step so they drifted down in spirals while Bonk walked beside him with a velvet pillow on his back holding 2 rings that caught the sunlight. The guests made delighted sounds, but then Domino appeared and everyone fell silent. She wore a white dress that flowed as she moved with her dark hair in soft waves over her shoulders and the death stone ring glinting on her finger. She walked alone because, as she'd explained during planning, "I'm choosing this. I'm walking to you because I want to, not because anyone is giving me away," and Jay had loved her more for it. As she approached, their eyes met and the universe faded until there was only this moment suspended in time. She reached him and they stood facing each other with the entirety of creation as their witness. "Hi," Domino said with a smile that outshone stars. "Hi," Jay replied, his voice thick with emotion. The Ancient One cleared her throat and began. "We are gathered to witness the union of 2 souls who have fought for each other, bled for each other, and built a family against impossible odds." She paused to let the weight of those words settle. "I have witnessed many lifetimes and countless beginnings and endings, but I have never seen someone create an entire universe simply to give their family a safe place to exist." A hint of smile crossed her ancient features. "It remains one of the most direct solutions I have encountered." Quiet laughter rippled through the gathering. Many of you stood beside them in their darkest hours and witnessed their struggles and triumphs. Now you witness them make a sacred promise, a promise this universe will honor. She turned to Jay with ceremonial gravity. Do you, Jay, take Nina Thurman as your wife? To stand beside her through all circumstances? To protect her, cherish her, and love her for as long as you both shall live? I do. No hesitation, clear and certain as gravity itself. The Ancient One turned to Domino with the same solemnity. And do you, Nina Thurman, take Jay as your husband? To stand beside him through all circumstances? To protect him, cherish him, and love him for as long as you both shall live? Domino's smile was radiant enough to shame the sun. I do. The rings. Bonk stepped forward so Bobby could retrieve them from the velvet pillow with exaggerated care. Jay took Domino's ring, simple silver with delicate engravings and, my reality, inscribed inside as the name of their daughter and the universe they inhabited and the life they chose, then slid it onto her finger. Domino took Jay's matching ring inscribed with always and placed it on his finger with hands that trembled slightly. The Ancient One raised one hand in blessing. By the power granted to me by this universe and all who dwell within it, I pronounce you husband and wife. Her expression softened into something almost warm. You may kiss. Jay drew Domino into his arms and kissed her while the gathering erupted in cheers and applause. Johnny's fireworks spelled finally across the sky as Peter's camera started smoking from overuse and Bobby cried without bothering to hide it. When they parted, both were smiling like idiots. Took you long enough, Domino said breathlessly. Worth every moment, Jay replied before love ran to them and threw his arms around both. You're married. Mom. Dad. Domino gathered him with one arm while lifting Maya from the stroller with the other, the baby's eyes opening to take in her parents on their wedding day. Jay wrapped his arms around all three, wife, son and daughter, and held them as if he could anchor this moment in eternity. This is everything I wanted, he said with his voice breaking. The celebration continued with music and laughter while the Ancient One conjured food that tasted like beloved memories, and eternity and infinity. Siblings painted the sky with colors that had never existed before this universe learned to dream. But for Jay, surrounded by his family, the rest faded into background noise that couldn't compete with the sound of Maya's tiny yawn and Love's excited chatter about the ceremony and cake and flowers and how wonderfully Bonk had carried the rings. Domino laughed, the sound pure and unguarded, and Jay was finally, completely home in the universe he built and the family he fought for and the reality he'd created from nothing but love and stubborn determination. Maya settled in her mother's arms, tiny and perfect in theirs, while Love continued his enthusiastic monologue and the celebration swirled around them like a galaxy finding its center. This was his reality, and this was home. Chapter 351, Final Note. Image here. I don't really know how to start this. When I first started writing back in August, this was just a fun idea, something impulsive I didn't expect would grow into a nearly 200-chapter journey. I didn't even think I'd stick with it this long, and I definitely didn't expect so many of you to come along for the ride. But here we are. Almost April. Almost 200 chapters. Somehow we made it. I won't lie, this wasn't easy. There were days I stared at a blank screen questioning everything. Whether the story made sense. Whether the characters felt real. Whether anyone even cared anymore. There were times I felt burnt out and thought about dropping it, times I genuinely didn't think I could finish something this big. But every time I slowed down, I'd open the comments and there you guys were. Reacting, theorizing, laughing, calling out my mistakes, getting hyped over moments I almost skipped past. That kept me going. Your comments changed how I write. You made me think more about pacing, emotion, how scenes flow, how characters feel instead of just what they do. Some of the best moments in this story exist because something one of you said made me pause and rethink a scene. This story started as an impulsive fix and stayed chaotic, but somewhere along the way it became something I'm genuinely proud of. To everyone who read silently, to everyone who commented or just checked in once in a while, to the people who stuck around from chapter 1 and those who joined halfway through and stayed till the end, thank you. You made this worth it. As for what's next, I'm already working on a new FIC all-in, Vincible, with bigger stakes, tighter writing, and lessons learned from this journey. If you like the chaos and character moments here, I think you'll enjoy what's coming. This might be the end of this story, but it's not the end of me writing. I've learned too much to stop now. So if you enjoyed this ride, stick around. The next one. I'm going even bigger. Max_Striker. Chapter 352, Epilogue 1, Maya's First Adventure. The physical sensation of tearing through the boundary of an isolated universe always felt like getting shoved through a cold and wet sponge. Love kept his grip firm on his little sister's hand as the multiversal static washed over them and pulled at their clothes. The cosmic noise finally faded away and gravity reasserted itself with a loud pop of displaced air. Love was 12 years old now. He was completely used to the dizzying nausea of interdimensional travel because his father dragged them across the multiverse on a regular basis. He looked down at Maya to make sure she was handling the transition well. Maya was 6 years old. She inherited their father's caramel brown skin and their mother's striking white hair. Her eyes were entirely her own. They were a deep and glowing purple that subtly hinted at Domino's elevated station in the multiversal hierarchy. Right now those purple eyes were wide open and completely overwhelmed as she took in the massive metallic lobby of the Baxter building. Image here. To a kid who grew up in an isolated and quiet dimension, the headquarters of the Fantastic Four looked like a futuristic spaceship. Glowing blue energy panels lined the reinforced walls. Bizarre scientific instruments floated in the air on humming anti-gravity repulsors, and holographic displays projected complex math equations across the ceiling. Before Maya could even ask a single question about the floating metal spheres, 2 loud voices echoed down the main corridor. Big Brother Love. Maya. You guys are finally here. Franklin Richards came sprinting down the hallway and his messy blonde hair bounced with every step. Nate Summers was running right beside him with a massive grin on his face. Let us go already, Nate said as he came to a sliding halt on the polished floor. We are going to be incredibly late for the carnival and I really want to see her reaction up close. Love opened his mouth to reply but he never got the chance. Maya's feet literally lifted off the ground. She completely bypassed the strict laws of physics and flew directly toward the 2 boys. She tackled them both into a massive and tangled hug that sent all 3 of them crashing to the floor. Frankie. Nate. I missed you guys so much. Maya yelled cheerfully. Both Franklin and Nate giggled in surprise as they tried to untangle themselves. They were completely caught off guard by her sudden flight capabilities. CYOA. You can fly now? Nate asked, his jaw dropped open. Franklin immediately started throwing out a dozen rapid questions about her newly activated powers. He asked about her kinetic output and her maximum velocity limits because he spent way too much time around his genius father. Love stepped in with a quiet chuckle to stop the intense scientific interrogation. She just awakened her powers this morning, Love explained, and he gently patted his sister's white hair. But you guys have to keep it down. We want to keep it a total secret from Mom and Dad for a little bit so we can surprise them later tonight. Keeping a secret from a man who literally owned a magical shifting castle and a mother who manipulated probability was going to be nearly impossible. But Love figured they could manage it for at least a few hours. Before they could even discuss the logistics of hiding superpowers from a pair of highly observant parents, a loud mechanical hum filled the air. A girl came zooming down the hall on a sleek silver hoverboard. She wore oversized pilot goggles strapped to her forehead and she had a massive pout on her face. Look who finally decided to show up, Val Richards complained. She crossed her arms as she hovered a few feet off the ground and glared down at Love. You promised me you would take me to your home dimension today. I was so incredibly excited to finally see an isolated universe that is completely cut off from the rest of the multiverse. Maya peeked out from behind Love's leg and pointed a small finger at Val. Yeah. Big Bro promised to show you our Muffy Burrs. Love immediately looked down and put a hand on his sister's shoulder. Multiverse, Maya. It has a V sound. Maya pouted her lips and tried again. Multiverse. The isolated multiverse. Love just sighed and rubbed his forehead, deciding it was a completely lost cause for today. He looked back up at Val. Love smiled sheepishly and rubbed the back of his neck. I am sorry, Val. Dad was super busy hosting some major guests from a few foreign multiverses and things got really chaotic at the house. But I promise I will take you there right after this event is over, not. Only for Val to decide to play her age. She hummed dismissively and puffed out her cheeks while refusing to look at him directly. But Maya was not having any of that attitude. She floated right off the ground and jumped onto the hoverboard. She wrapped Val in a massive and crushing hug that nearly knocked the older girl off the floating metal board. Val's annoyed facade instantly melted away. It was replaced by a bright and embarrassed smile as she hugged the younger girl back. Okay, I forgive you, Val conceded. She took it upon herself to show Maya around the massive building. She pointed at the walls and explained how all the complicated machinery worked to the girl who was visiting Earth for the very first time. So, Val announced to the group as she floated slightly higher to address the boys. Mom and Dad are currently on a deep space mission dealing with the Clintar outbreak. And Uncle Ben and Uncle John are babysitting Jovan and Kala. That means we have 0 adult supervision today and we are completely free to stay awake as late as 9 o'clock. Before Val could fully revel in her highly rebellious bedtime plan, a large hand clamped down firmly on top of her head. Oh really, an adult voice muttered dryly. Do tell me what other grand mischief our little brainstorm is currently planning. Val froze. She awkwardly turned her head and saw Peter Parker standing right beside her. He raised an eyebrow as he tried to decide on an appropriate punishment for the little rebel. Big Bro Pete. Maya cheered. She lunged off the hoverboard and tackled Peter right in the stomach. Peter was a full-fledged adult now at 22 years old and he had filled out his frame considerably since his awkward teenage years. He laughed as he caught the little girl and hugged her back. Hey there, Maya. It has been a really long time. Is our special guest ready for her very first adventure on Earth? Peter asked as he put Maya on the floor. Yes. 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 I'm ready for the adventure. Maya chimed as she bounced on her heels. Love stepped in immediately and shook his head. Adventure, Maya. Use the V sound. Maya just ignored him completely and continued bouncing happily. Love and Nate and Franklin quickly circled Peter. The three older kids exchanged a knowing look and formed a tight wall in front of the adult. They eyed him with highly suspicious and calculating looks. Peter felt a distinct drop in the room's temperature as the three most overpowered children in the history of the multiverse scrutinized him. Hey Peter, Love asked while narrowing his eyes. Are you absolutely sure you picked up everything for the carnival? You didn't mess anything up because of your infamous Parker luck, did you? A drop of cold sweat actually formed on Peter's forehead. Babysitting these kids was terrifying on a good day. Chill out, guys. Everything is completely ready and accounted for. I quadruple-checked the reservations and I made sure nothing could possibly go wrong today. The kids just stared at him in perfect unison. They wore identical blank expressions that clearly communicated they had heard that exact excuse a million times before, and it usually ended with a building blowing up. Right, Peter coughed and he clapped his hands together to break the awkward tension. Anyway, we should really get going. We are walking to the museum park from here and Gwen is going to meet us there. Until she arrives, why don't we give our guest of honor Maya a proper walking tour of the city? Yay, all the kids yelled simultaneously. Peter let out a heavy breath and adjusted the collar of his jacket. He patted his pocket to make sure the small copper ring was still safely tucked inside. He just needed to survive the next few hours with these miniature gods and then he could finally execute his plan. The walk from the Baxter building and down into the bustling heart of Queens was a complete sensory overload for a 6-year-old. Maya kept her small hand gripped tightly around Love's fingers. She practically vibrated with excitement as she looked at everything around them. She grew up in a quiet and highly isolated pocket dimension where the only visitors were literal gods or demonic ants. Seeing the loud and chaotic streets of New York City was blowing her mind. The most amazing part was not the towering skyscrapers or the flying cars darting through the clouds. It was the people. A man with bright blue fur and a long prehensile tail was casually ordering a toasted bagel from a street vendor. A woman with massive iridescent butterfly wings was sitting on a park bench and feeding pigeons. A group of teenagers were playing basketball in a fenced court and one of them was literally using telekinesis to dunk the ball. Nobody was screaming. Nobody was running away in terror or calling the authorities. Peter noticed her staring at the basketball game and he smiled warmly. He shoved his hands deep into his jacket pockets. It's a pretty amazing sight, Peter said as he guided them around a crowded crosswalk. Ever since the New York battle where your dad saved the Earth and brought back thousands of people, things have completely changed around here. Franklin decided he needed to show off. He suddenly snapped his fingers and a ripple of reality-warping energy washed over his body. His casual street clothes instantly shifted into a pristine white scientist coat and his messy blonde hair turned a blinding shade of white. Yeah. And he did it by using my powers. Franklin yelled dramatically as he used his powers to materialize a white coat over his shoulders and struck a ridiculous and highly exaggerated heroic pose right in the middle of the sidewalk. I am X. The savior of the timeline. Everyone burst out laughing at the terrible impression. Love just rolled his eyes and pushed Franklin forward so he would not block pedestrian traffic. Nate stepped up next to Maya and he looked around the street with a nostalgic grin. It wasn't always this peaceful, Nate explained to her. Mom told me that people used to hate mutants. They used to throw rocks and hide behind giant killer robots. But ever since your dad stepped in and fixed the timeline, the public perception completely flipped. People who used to hide their gifts can openly show them in public without fear. They even play games together in the parks and nobody bats an eye. Peter nodded in agreement. A soft smile settled on his face as they made their way deeper into his home burrow. The world was finally safe and he was just hours away from asking the love of his life to marry him. Everything was going perfectly. Then his spider sense gave a sharp and highly uncomfortable buzz at the base of his skull. Peter stopped walking. The hair on his arms stood straight up. He turned his head sharply toward the local intersection then looked down the street just as the heavy glass window of a local bank completely shattered outward. The shrill and deafening sound of a security alarm immediately rang through the air. 4 heavily armed men wearing cheap plastic Avengers masks came sprinting out the front doors of the bank. They were carrying heavy canvas duffel bags stuffed full of stolen cash and they were waving automatic rifles at the pedestrians. Oh come on, Peter sighed heavily. He was completely off the clock today but he instinctively reached for the web shooters hidden under his jacket sleeves. Val immediately dropped into a combat stance on her silver hoverboard and her hands started glowing with raw energy. Nate's eyes flared with telekinetic power and Franklin cracked his knuckles. But before any of them could even move to intercept the robbers, a bright gold light flared from the corner of the street. A regular police officer with a slight beer belly was leaning against a mailbox. He was holding a half-eaten donut in one hand and he looked incredibly bored. He wiped a powdered crumb off his chin and let out a tired groan as a glowing gold aura completely coated his body like liquid sunlight. The officer's standard blue uniform was instantly replaced by a pristine white tactical suit. The golden aura wrapped around his standard-issue service pistol. He casually raised the weapon with one hand and fired a single bullet. The bullet traveled a few feet before it violently split 4 ways in midair. The fragmented projectiles rapidly expanded and transformed into a massive electrified energy net. The glowing net completely engulfed the group of fleeing robbers. A heavy current of golden electricity ran through the mesh and shocked them all into unconsciousness in less than a second. The robbers hit the pavement hard. Their weapons clattered across the concrete and their bodies twitched uncontrollably as the golden net pinned them to the ground. The most bizarre part of the entire scene was that the civilians on the street barely even reacted to the display of overwhelming force. A businessman simply stepped over one of the twitching robbers, clicked a quick photo on his phone, and kept walking with his iced coffee. The police officer sighed, holstered his glowing gun, and went back to eating his donut. Val shook her head in sheer disbelief as she watched the robbers get hauled away by the glowing beat cop. Those guys must really be lacking in the brain department, Val scoffed and she crossed her arms. Who even tries to rob a bank nowadays since the golden shower? Love immediately snickered at the terrible naming convention. He slapped a hand over his mouth to hide his laugh but his shoulders shook uncontrollably. Peter had to cough aggressively into his fist to hide his own amusement. Maya tugged hard on Peter's sleeve. She looked completely confused by the entire interaction. Big bro Pete? Maya asked innocently. What is a golden show dash? Okay. Let me explain. Peter interrupted loudly. His face turned completely red as he panicked and quickly knelt down to Maya's level to stop her from finishing that sentence. He shot a withering glare at Love and Val before he turned his attention back to the 6-year-old girl. So, Peter started gently and he pointed toward the glowing police officer. On a very special day a few years ago, this terrifying and unstoppable monster called the Fury attacked humans all over the world. The heroes were seriously outnumbered and we were losing badly. Maya's eyes went wide. She loved hearing stories about her father. Your dad realized that being a superhero was way too much work and he really wanted to retire, Peter explained. So he went to meet Mother Earth herself. He actually had a face-to-face meeting with the literal goddess Gia. He gave her the power of the lifeguard system so she could protect everyone automatically. He gave his powers to a goddess? Maya asked in pure awe. Yep, Peter nodded and he smiled at her reaction. And ever since that day, almost every tragedy that could befall us humans is stopped by those gifts from Gia. She gives us temporary power-ups to deal with everything from multiversal alien invasions to petty bank robbers. It completely automated superhero work and it changed the world forever. It automated the work? Maya asked, stumbling over the syllables. Love immediately leaned over. Automated, Maya. Automated. Maya huffed and crossed her little arms. Automated. I know how to say it. More wonder lit up in Maya's bright purple eyes. She looked back at the bank and then up at her older brother. But why was that specific day so special? Maya asked. Love walked over and he gently poked his sister on the nose. He gave her a soft and teasing smile. My dear sister Maya, Love said playfully. Did you really forget your big brother's birthday? Maya gasped and her hands flew up to cover her mouth. The realization hit her and her purple eyes instantly got shiny with unshed tears. She felt terrible for forgetting such an important detail about her family history. Ah. I am so sorry big bro Love. Maya cried out and she started fidgeting nervously with the hem of her shirt. Love immediately dropped to his knees and pulled her into a tight hug. He just smiled warmly and rubbed her back. He was completely relieved to see his sister's cute and highly apologetic face instead of her crying. It's okay Maya, Love reassured her softly. Don't worry about it. Peter watched the two siblings hug and he felt a warm tightness in his chest. Jay, the power broker, was a terror to his enemies and he had a terrifying reputation across the multiverse. But seeing his kids acting like a normal and loving family proved that the men had built something genuinely beautiful. Peter stood up and checked his watch. The sun was going to start setting soon and he needed to get them to the carnival. All right team, Peter clapped his hands together and pointed down the avenue. Next stop is X-Town. We have carnival games to beat and I need to win a giant stuffed bear before Gwen gets there so I look incredibly cool. The kids cheered and they continued their walk down the bustling streets of Queens. The walk ended when they crossed the threshold into X-Town. The atmosphere shifted immediately. The smell of exhaust fumes and hot asphalt faded and it was replaced by the heavy scent of fried dough and powdered sugar and roasted peanuts. X-Town was essentially a massive permanent carnival built directly over the old subway grates. String lights hung between the brick buildings and illuminated the crowded streets. Mutants of every shape and color were running the booths. A guy with 4 arms was spinning multiple cones of cotton candy at once. A woman with gills was running the water gun game and using her own moisture to fill the targets. It was loud and bright and completely overwhelming. Maya stopped dead in her tracks. She pointed a tiny finger at the entrance plaza. A stone monument stood right in the center of the square. It was a carving of Jay. He was not striking a heroic pose. He was just standing there with his hands in his pockets and looking down at the street like he was incredibly tired but unwilling to leave his post. Papa. Maya cheered as she bounced on her heels and tugged excitedly on Love's hand. Big bro, look at the big statue. It's a statue of Papa. Love immediately knelt down and gently tapped her chin to get her attention. Statue, Maya. You have to enunciate the T sound in the middle. Statue-y. Maya pouted her lips and crossed her arms stubbornly. Statue. I said it right. Love just sighed and patted her white hair. We'll practice your phonetics when we get home. She let go of Love's hand and sprinted across the plaza. She threw her arms around the solid stone leg of the monument and hugged it tightly. Peter pulled out his phone and snapped a quick picture. Love walked over and asked Peter to send the photo to him later so he could show their parents. Maya finally realized the cold stone was not her actual father. Her cheeks turned bright red and she pushed her index fingers together in embarrassment as she waddled back to the group. Love took her hand again and pointed down at the sewer grates beneath their feet. Before Dad came along and fixed things, Love explained quietly to his sister. The people who live here had to hide down in the dark tunnels. They were called Morlocks. They lived in the dirt because they looked different and regular humans were scared of them. Dad pulled them out of the gutters. He forced the city to give them this land and he made sure nobody could ever push them back underground. That is why they built the statue of him. Maya looked at the stone face of her father and then looked around at the laughing mutants enjoying the carnival. She nodded her head and she seemed to understand the weight of what her family had done for this world. They walked deeper into the park. A giant screen was mounted to the side of a brick building. It was broadcasting a live feed of a wedding. Rogue and Gambit were standing at an altar covered in white flowers. The entire park erupted into loud cheers when the 2 mutants finally kissed. Val stopped her hoverboard and stared at Nate. Wait a minute, Val said and she crossed her arms. Your Uncle Gambit and Aunt Rogue are getting married right now. What are you doing here at a carnival? Nate shrugged and stuffed his hands into his pockets. I created a psychic clone of myself to attend the wedding in my place. It's really boring to sit through a lengthy ceremony when you have already watched the future play out more than 100 times. I already know what the cake tastes like and I know exactly who is going to catch the bouquet. Franklin nodded in complete agreement. Love also nodded as if experiencing non-linear time was just a common and relatable problem for 12-year-olds. Peter rubbed his face and sighed. He felt completely out of his depth with these kids. That is totally unfair, Val yelled and she stomped her foot on her silver board. I want to see the future too. Just wait until I finish building my own time machine. I am going to take Maya on so many temporal adventures. Right, Maya. Maya folded under the intense peer pressure and nodded her head rapidly. Love opened his mouth to argue against taking his 6-year-old sister into the dangerous time stream. He never got the chance to complain. 2 pale hands appeared from behind Peter and covered his eyes. Guess who? A playful voice whispered. Peter smiled instantly. A soft blush crept up his neck and his heart rate spiked. Come on, Gwen. You know exactly how spider sense works. Gwen opened her hands and stepped around to face him. She leaned in and gave him a quick kiss on the lips. Gross. Nate and Franklin yelled simultaneously. They both stuck their tongues out in disgust and turned their heads away. Love stood up straight and crossed his arms. He lifted his chin in pure pride. It's not gross. It is how adults show genuine affection and love. The other kids actually stopped complaining and clapped politely. They muttered to each other about how incredibly mature Love was acting. Gwen laughed and knelt down on the pavement. She pulled Maya into a tight hug. She had not seen the little girl in months and she practically squeezed the life out of her. They spent the next 2 hours walking through the park and playing games. They bought plastic toys and ate way too much cotton candy. Maya stopped at a merchandise booth and bought a black shirt with a white circle over the left eye. It was Domino's classic logo. I miss Mom, Maya mumbled and she held the shirt tightly against her chest. Love picked her up and rested her on his hip. It's just a few more hours of fun, Maya. Then we will go right back home to see them. Maya nodded and her purple eyes brightened again. They walked over to a carnival game. It was the classic milk bottle toss. A carny with green scales on his face was barking at people to try their luck. The game was notoriously rigged. The bottom bottles were filled with solid lead and it was physically impossible to knock them all over with a single baseball. Maya wanted the giant stuffed bear hanging from the ceiling. Love put her down and handed the carny a $5 bill. Maya picked up the baseball. She did not know how to throw properly. She just sort of lobbed it underhand. The ball flew through the air at a pathetic and slow speed. The carny smirked and got ready to hand her a cheap plastic ring as a consolation prize. Maya's purple eyes glowed faintly. A subtle wave of probability manipulation washed over the booth. The strict laws of physics simply decided to take a break. The slow-moving baseball barely tapped the top milk bottle. A sudden and completely inexplicable gust of wind swept through the tent. The solid lead bottles shifted. The center of gravity failed. All 6 bottles collapsed backward and crashed onto the canvas floor. The carny stared at the fallen bottles in total shock. His mouth hung open and he rubbed his eyes. Maya clapped her hands together and pointed at the giant bear. The carny silently handed it over and he looked terrified of the 6-year-old girl. While the younger kids were distracted by the massive plush toy, Peter quickly pulled Love away from the group. They stepped behind the fried dough stand to get some privacy. Peter was sweating and his hands were shaking. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small object. He held it out to Love. It was a copper quarter. The edges were worn down and the metal was slightly tarnished. It was the exact same lucky coin that Jay had given Peter 7 years ago before they fought the multiversal invasion. "I am going to do it tonight," Peter whispered and his voice cracked slightly. "Could you help me out?" Love looked at the copper coin and understood exactly what Peter was asking for. He took the coin and closed his fist around it as his hands lit up. Love looked up at Peter and gave him a confident wink. His eyes glowed a faint and supportive blue. "We have your back, Peter," Love said quietly. "Just get her to the Ferris wheel at sunset and leave the rest to us." As the sun began to dip below the New York skyline and painted the clouds in shades of bruised orange and purple, Love decided it was time to execute the final phase of their plan. He stopped walking right in the middle of the crowded thoroughfare and let out a loud and incredibly forced cough. Franklin and Nate caught the signal immediately. They started hacking and wheezing like they were suddenly dying of a Victorian lung disease. Val just rolled her eyes at the terrible performance, but she nudged Maya with her elbow. Maya caught on and let out a tiny and completely unconvincing sneeze. Gwen stopped walking and her face scrunched up with genuine worry. "Oh no. Are you guys okay?" Love looked at her with a perfectly straight face. "It seems we have all caught a terrible and sudden cold. We desperately need to go find a doctor right this second." He started ushering the kids away in a hurried mob and pushed them toward the food stalls. Gwen stared after them in total shock. "Since when do literal children of gods catch the common cold?" Gwen asked. Peter grabbed her hand and his palms were sweating profusely. "Don't worry about it. It must be one of their weird multiversal pranks. Look, the line for the Ferris wheel is completely empty right now. Let's go for a ride." He pulled her along toward the massive glowing wheel before she could argue or try to chase after the kids. Meanwhile, behind a nearby popcorn stand, the kids peeked out from their hiding spot to watch the couple board the ride. Val shook her head in disgust. "That was the worst acting I have ever seen in my entire life." Love ignored her harsh critique and clapped his hands together. "Guys, we have to move quickly. We still need to build the projection matrix before they reach the top." And just like that, the 3 most overpowered mutants in the history of the multiverse temporarily reduced themselves to a makeshift printing press just to help their favorite web slinger. Franklin snapped his fingers and warped local reality to manifest high-grade holographic lenses out of thin air. Nate's eyes glowed bright pink as he used precise telekinesis to assemble the delicate wiring and connect the heavy batteries without using his hands. Val furiously typed code into a stolen start pad to program the animations and sync the light projectors. Maya just stood nearby and let her purple eyes glow faintly so her passive luck ensured the entire bootleg machine did not explode in their faces. Up in the cramped Ferris wheel cabin, Gwen was still talking and worrying over the kids and their sudden illness. She stopped mid-sentence when she noticed Peter was completely silent. He was sitting stiffly on the wooden bench and sweating through his jacket. "Pete, do you have a cold too?" she asked while reaching out to feel his forehead. Peter gently waved her hand away. "No. It's something else entirely." He looked out the scratched acrylic window. The sun was fully setting now. They had reached the very top of the wheel and it gave them a breathtaking view of the illuminated city. The lights of New York looked like scattered diamonds. Peter smiled and finally found his courage. He reached across the small table and took both of Gwen's hands in his own. "Gwen, it has been exactly 7 years since we both got our powers," Peter started. His voice was soft but incredibly steady. "We have looked at this exact skyline for so many years. We have swung through it together every single night. We have faced incredibly fun times and insanely hard times and the terrifyingly worst times imaginable. But the most important thing is that I faced all of it with you. Gwen blinked and her heart rate spiked. Peter, that is so incredibly sweet. But is everything all right? Why are you doing the sudden sweet talk? Did you finally agree to take the job working under J. Jonah Jameson like I told you to? Peter laughed nervously and squeezed her hands tighter. No, it's not that. It's just that after I first got my powers during the invasion, you were there to help me understand them and ground me. Then during the Fury attack, you got these amazing powers just to save me and heal my broken bones. And then there was that nightmare with the Cosmic Court. You have been my absolute rock through every single disaster. I think what we have deserves to be called more than just puppy love. Pete, what are you doing? Gwen asked as her voice dropped to a shaky whisper. Peter leaned forward and kissed her softly on the lips. He pulled back and pointed out the window down at the park plaza. Just look down there. Gwen turned her head and looked out the glass. Down in the concrete plaza, a massive and colorful holographic display had been projected into the night air. It featured incredibly cute and hand-drawn doodles of Spider-Man in red and blue alongside Ghost Spider in white and pink and black. The two cartoon spiders were shooting webs that connected to form a giant glowing heart. Written in massive neon letters across the projection were 4 words. Will you marry me? Below that was a smaller postscript that read, Please do not eat my head for this. Gwen gasped and tears instantly welled up in her bright eyes. She turned back around. Peter was already down on one knee in the cramped cabin space. He was holding up a ring. It was made of simple copper with beautiful and intricate engravings running all along the metal band. Gwendolyn Maxine Stacy, Peter said while his voice grew thick with emotion. Will you do me the honor of marrying me? Gwen slapped a hand over her mouth to muffle her crying. She did not even hesitate for a single second. Yes. Of course I will, Pete. Yes. She threw herself at him and they kissed deeply as the Ferris wheel rocked gently from the shifting weight. Peter slipped the copper ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Gwen pulled back and looked closely at the band. She noticed the specific engravings and realized they matched the markings of a standard quarter perfectly. She gasped softly. Pete. Is this the lucky coin Jay gave you? Peter nodded and wiped a stray tear from his own eye. From now on you are my only destiny in my whole life. He leaned forward and kissed her affectionately on the cheek. Gwen sniffed and looked back out the window. Wait a minute. How did you even get that massive hologram down there? Peter laughed and pointed down at the plaza again. Gwen looked closer and saw Love and Franklin and Nate and Val and little Maya all standing around a glowing projector device. They were cheering wildly and high-fiving each other and yelling things about their highly successful mission. After a long and incredibly happy evening filled with memories they would keep forever, Love and Maya finally bid everyone goodbye. A bright flash of blue teleportation light illuminated the air and they found themselves back in the lush garden of their own home. They were both giggling uncontrollably. They were incredibly happy that they had successfully helped Peter pull off the proposal mission. Love confidently snapped his fingers and used his powers to instantly shift the local environment from a dark night back to a sunny and pleasant afternoon. But when they turned around to face the house, their giggles died instantly. Jay and Domino were standing right behind them on the porch. Both parents had their arms crossed tightly and they were wearing very serious and uncompromising expressions. So, Jay said while raising a single eyebrow. What exactly is this mission I am hearing about? Before Jay could even press the strict interrogation further, Maya's face lit up with pure joy. Papa, she yelled. She launched herself off the ground and flew directly into Jay's chest. She hugged him as tight as she possibly could. I missed you so incredibly much. All the strict seriousness completely melted off Jay's face in an instant. He caught her easily and a massive and goofy smile broke across his face as he hugged his daughter back tightly. Domino just let out a long and fond sigh before uncrossing her arms. Of course. Daddy's little princess can always melt Daddy's cold heart without even trying. She walked over and pulled Love into a warm embrace. She pressed a gentle kiss to his scalp. Well, get to it, mister, Domino said with a smirk as she ruffled Love's white hair. Tell us all about this grand adventure you two went on today. Maya giggled brightly from the safety of Jay's arms. Well, it all started when I awakened my powers this morning. Jay and Domino both froze completely solid. They slowly looked at each other and blinked in total shock. Then they looked back down at their 6-year-old daughter. You awakened what? They yelled in perfect unison. Jay lifted Maya right off the ground as he settled her comfortably on his broad shoulders. She grabbed his hair to steady herself and let out a happy cheer. Jay looked over at Love and pointed a stern finger at him. You are still grounded for sneaking your sister out to Earth without telling us, Jay said. But he was smiling so hard that the threat carried no weight. But I am incredibly proud of you for watching out for her, Love. You did good today. Love smiled and stuffed his hands into his pockets. I always have her back, Dad. Domino walked up and linked her arm through Jay's arm. She leaned her head against his bicep as they turned to look at their massive home. Warm yellow lights were glowing in the windows and the faint smell of dinner was drifting out from the kitchen. Come on, Domino smiled. Let us go inside. You guys need to tell us exactly how Peter finally managed to propose without ruining it. Jay laughed loudly and adjusted Maya on his shoulders. The four of them walked together up the wooden porch steps and went inside their home. Author's note. A small thank you to its side character A for this commission. This was my first one, and you trusted me with something that honestly meant a lot more than just an extra chapter. You gave me the chance to return to Jay's story after it was already complete and explore his family in a way I hadn't planned but really enjoyed writing. Getting to expand on Maya, love, and the future they're growing into was something special for me, and that only happened because of your idea and support. So yeah, genuinely, thank you for that.